And I didn't like move when I was a child.
Now there's two.
From like 17 onward. I said to my husband,
These are like
they're significant amount of time. Like, I want to buy a house.
Sorry.
Buy a house.
Develop the association.
You can't.
Yeah. Do you guys prefer the wide view for you or the close up like this?
I think maybe the wide version. So we can move around and.
Oh, yeah. All right, Amber. Oh.
Good morning, guys.
Oh, good morning. Thank you for being here. Okay, I think we are all set to start admitting everyone. So let's go ahead and get going. Call me first, actually.
It's all good. You're good. It's fine. It was a picture. It's fine.
Buddy, I'm so sorry about my voice. I'm just gonna say a few words and then pass it back off to Kate and Kaylin because I've never lost my voice like this. It hurts a little bit and I'd like to not continue using my voice. But if you, hopefully you do recognize me at this point. My name is Katie and I've been with Accepted since the very beginning. And this is my first time getting to see so many of your faces in person. So it was deeply and profoundly meaningful to be here today with you all. I want to start first before my voice gives out completely by thanking the panelists for really tackling the way that we did it this year. We've been just trying so hard to think about ways that this can be really truly for and by the community. So not only did you make my job a little bit easier this year, but it's been such a special gift to see you all bond together through the co-creation of those panels. And that was not an intended outcome, but it's something that it's probably the highlight of my experience so far. So thank you, everyone. I wanted to talk a little bit about what accepted means to me at this moment in my life. Again, before my voice gives out, because the last year has been a little bit of an identity crisis for me. I was a community college student and then transferred to UC Berkeley where I finished my bachelor's and then went straight on into a 2-year master's program. And in total, that took me about 10 years to complete. And so for 10 years, I only thought of myself as a student and then as a researcher, as somebody who belonged in and to academia. And then all of a sudden I wasn't. And that is one of the most unmooring experiences that I have had in my adult life. And for a little while, I had a foot out of Accepted. Actually, I had 2 feet out of Accepted. I left Accepted in my final year of my master's degree because it was just too much. I needed to be able to focus on the master's degree, and it was as much as I could handle in that time. And so I left. That wasn't though without the door being open to always come back. And I feel like I've been a little bit like a cat where you just need to, a stray cat, you need to leave the door open and let me come in on my own and maybe get scared off the first couple times. But eventually I find out there's actually like TV and a bed and wonderful people to do. So I stick around. But it was also because this identity of academic had left me. Not unexpectedly, but without choice. I had met the end of my program and I wasn't planning on continuing on to a PhD. And so I had no choice but to entirely re-reconcile my identity and who I was. And I didn't know, maybe this is on me, but it just did not seem like I could be a part of accepted without that identity. And as I've been letting myself rest and recover from that really intense experience, and I'm talking way more than I thought I would, I apologize. And started to feel a little bit of that energy come back to me. I have started to reframe accepted in my mind as well, and started to put a couple of toes, a couple of feet back into accepted. I mean, first of all, I'm a part of the team, and I organize the symposium, and I constantly have all these ideas I'm throwing out. But as much as that is something that it comes a little naturally to me, is engaging with the community and being able to open myself up and trust that a non-strictly academic identity will be welcome and accepted is hard. And it's a little hypocritical because we talk about that so much, but it's a hard thing to be vulnerable about. It's a hard thing to really, truly accept. So being here with everybody and hearing the way that no matter where we are in terms of our relationship to academia, it's been healing and a little transformative and very encouraging. And just to give like a little bit of an anecdote about that, I remember talking to Kaylin about presenting at the Costume Society of America back in July. And I was talking to my panelists, and one is like, University of Vienna, University of Georgia. And then they get to me and they're like, what do we put for you? And I said, I don't know. I can't say the new school because I'm not there anymore. I can't say Illinois State University because even though I work there, I'm not a researcher or a faculty member. They did not want to put independent researcher.
Oh. Yeah.
So I said, you can put ISU, comma, independent researcher. And it felt very intimidating because I was presenting with people who are the first generation of scholars in my field. And I was like, who am I to be here as independent researcher? And Kaylin looked me dead in the eyes as you can get on Zoom. And said, Katie, you are embodying what accepted is meant to be. And I think that's when I started to feel a little bit more like, oh, yeah, you're right. It doesn't have to be one thing. And it's something I think I'm going to have to continually come back to and process over and over again. But that's the hard work that we do of deconstructing something that has existed for centuries. So that's really all I have left to say. I do real quick just want to shout out to Kate and Kaylin because fun story, and then I'll wrap up. First time I ever met Kate in person, I was also deathly ill. And we were working really hard to produce something for Accepted, and they just took care of me. Sent Kate off into the unknown, into a part of America she'd never been to a drugstore she'd never heard of, to pick up medications she'd never heard of with no Wi-Fi or internet, just to bring it back to my deathbed so I could finally feel well enough to show up for the rest of the team. And so being here, sick all over again. I'm not sick right now, but the recovery process, I'm like, oh, it's just a bit of a full circle moment. I'm sorry I have no immune system. And I appreciate you guys for taking care of me always. And to the community for letting me trust you enough to take care of this transformation. So I wanted to talk about the symposium and how it's like my baby, but I'm going to stop there because I think that was better. So thank you so much. Welcome to day 2, and I hope you all have a wonderful.
Okay, so the sequence of events, if I may. So today is Researchers' Day, and a little bit of context. In previous, by the way, I feel very anxious, so I'm just going to play with Pudgy while we talk. In previous years, this day was really focused on interdisciplinary research and really giving everyone an opportunity to share their work. And over the years, like we've tried a different kind of amalgamation of events and priorities for the symposium. And this year, what we really wanted was to have our team kind of give you some skills and to give you some tools to work with, in addition to showing off all of the incredible work that our community is doing in their research. So to begin, we have an incredible session with Polly and Kalia. I'll introduce them in just a second.
And a penguin.
And a penguin.
Oh, and a penguin. This is Pudgy. I just brought him the other day because he feels tactilely nice. And then we'll have the 3-minute thesis presentations. This is actually based on a competition that they put on at Yale. This is not a competition. This is just a space for us to share our work. And then I have a session that I'll be leading on funding and admissions. So if you are currently in the process of thinking about applying to graduate school, applying for funding, we'll have some information there and time for Q&A. So without further ado, Kate, do you have anything that you wanted to say? No. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to Polly and Kalia to lead us into our first workshop.
Thank you so much. Hey. Fab. Can everyone hear us online? Is that all right, Claudia? Can you give us a little thumbs up? We're good? Magic. Okay. Well, good afternoon and a very, very, very warm welcome. So happy to have you all here in this room and so happy to have everyone here online. We really appreciate you coming along on this beautiful, kind of slightly sunny Sunday now to think about what reimagining your research rhythm and what research could feel like when you are moving through this space with systems that are really sustainable and really support you. So, Helen, thank you so much for that lovely introduction. Everyone in this room knows us already, but for those of us that might be joining online and might be wondering who we are, my name is Dr. Polly Hember. This is Dr. Kalia I. We are the PH Done team at Accepted. So PH Done is a doctoral completion program that's run within Accepted and supported by Kate and Kaylin. So it looks to support the PhD process with these ideas that we'll get into throughout this next hour that we have together. And it really centers folks' well-being and those sustainable systems and really puts the researcher at the heart of the research. And then that's our ethos. That's like the core of PhD. And so that's what we wanted to bring to you folks here today, to think like wherever you are in your research like journey, your research rhythm, whether you're starting out, whether like Meg, you're moving through your master's, whether like Christy, you're moving through your PhD program, maybe like myself and like Katie, we're kind of embodying the like independent researcher mode. Wherever you are, we hope that these like quiet, gentle prompts spark some thinking and support you through that journey, wherever that may be. So that's a little bit about PH Done and our ethos. I'd love to hand over to the wonderful Kalia to kind of continue setting our intention and to ground it.
Polly, beautiful. Again, I'm Dr. Kalia. Greetings, everyone. Shout out to you all in our Zoom room. As a heads up, we're going to be coming to you. We're going to be hearing from a couple of you, and we're just so thankful to be with you all today. It's really a privilege and an honor. I cannot say anything else before I share that this community means so much to me. I became Dr. Kalia in part because of this community, being able to be nurtured here, help facilitate. I like to tell people I was facilitating study sessions at the time, but really what was happening was I was trying to figure out how to get through my own writing anxiety And I am pretty, I can undergo like external pressure in a good way. And so when I would see all these bookish, scholarly people working so hard, I was like, Lee, you can't be leading these sessions and not writing, girl. So thank you to this community. So thankful. And we hope we see this as an opportunity also just to give back to a community that has really nurtured us as well. So we will begin with just a bit of a grounding. This is important to both Holly and I. I like to tell people, I've told a few of you this already who have been so kind to acknowledge me as having kind of a grounded presence. And I said, I don't wake up like this. It's cultivated, it's practice, it's moment by moment by moment. And then I can also think about sessions that I've been to, conferences, and acknowledge that there's been at different seasons, I was in a different place. Maybe at that time I was relating to my research and my writing in a positive way, but there were often times, most of the time, if I'm being honest, especially during my PhD, where I was actually just feeling some dread sometimes, right? Or anxiousness about feedback, or, you know, am I going to succeed? Am I going to meet my next milestone? So we want to honor that there's a diversity of feelings and experiences that are here today. And so we are going to start by just grounding a little bit. And so I'm going to invite you all to do what I love to invite our PhD community to do at the beginning of any call we have, and that is take the most nourishing breath you've taken all day. Invite you one more time. Take the most nourishing breath you've taken all day. And I invite with that specific prompt about the most nourishing breath you've taken all day as a way to set us up for this conversation we're going to have about really centering yourself, your needs, what comes to you, right? Some of us needed in this moment maybe a deep, long breath. Some might have been like, you know what, I just need to get it in, right? Whatever that is like, it's perfectly good. You all please come in. You are so welcome. And so with that spirit, you know, as we continue to go, if there's anything at any point that you might feel anxious about the conversation or anything, I just want to remind you to go back to your breath, find the most nourishing breath you've had today.
So, taking that breath in together, we know that we can use this space, the online space in this room, however we like, in a way that supports us. We're now going to think through a little bit about why we're here. Specifically thinking about setting us up to start, you know, questioning, maybe interrogating, maybe gently reframing this idea of a research rhythm or a routine. So, for those, if I've spoken to you at all, over the course of this weekend so far, we've mentioned the PhD process. You know that my PhD journey was, you know, it was rather rocky. We've connected, Kalia and I, our research journeys, our PhD journeys. They presented certain challenges.
And continue to.
And continue to, our research journey continue to present these challenges. And, you know, we want to say it's hard work. I think I had this idea of a PhD student or a researcher that I was trying to embody and aspire to this whole time. And I don't know whether anyone else in this space can kind of empathize or sympathize with those thoughts. I thought that being a PhD student meant being on your own in a library with my nose in a book and being immersed in the research, but also working around the clock. And this idea of an isolated lone scholar working, and that was never going to support me. That was never going to sustain me. That was never going to work for me. But I think I really put myself down whole while through, because I was like always trying to aspire to something that, you know, never, ever, ever going to work. And these things, like isolation, precarity, like different workloads, work rhythms, like caring responsibilities, all of these things, they compound that feeling of like, Katie, you said that brilliant word, like feeling unmoored, right? In your research journey. Makes it feel like we're suddenly like that like wonderful research that we're all like, that we're all in this room here because we love research. We love doing what we do. Suddenly that becomes difficult, that becomes joyless. These feelings, they make it feel harder. We feel like the research, we're working against it rather than working with it. So this is why we're here today. This is why Clea and I are here at the front of this room, here to tell you it doesn't have to be that hard. There are other ways to move through your research in a way that where you like work with it, not against it. And so that's what we want to say. That's what we want to say. And if you just take one thing away from this session, that's really what I hope you take away from. It doesn't need to be this hard. There are ways that we can do this that really center our well-being, our communities, and also our humanity, right? And those three things we feel need to come first. The research is wonderful. This is incredible. Our scholarship, this is so valuable. This matters so much. But those three things we feel need to come first. So that's a little bit about why we're here. But to kind of understand like how we can move forward, we're now going to think through maybe what we're going to let go of.
Right. Thank you, Polly. Yeah, one way I like to talk about this is it's not just about what we do, it's about how we do it. So if you think about your individual journey of doing research, again, whether that is in a PhD program, an online program, a master's program, whether you have gotten your PhD already, whether you are an independent scholar, from whatever position that you have, whatever role, you value, all of us in this global room, Zoom here in Oxford, we value the pursuit of knowledge. We value curiosity, right? And then of course, with that research comes writing, right? And you're like, yeah, right? And that's where things can sometimes get a little bit real. But I like to think that the how we do it matters, right? Like, it's not just about doing the thing, it's about how we do it. And so I think what Polly just said so beautifully, yeah, right? We're in the right place. Are we in the right place? We with y'all? Okay, talk back to us, okay? In the chat, we want this, y'all was lit in the chat yesterday. Please do not neglect this today. Let's put in the chat your energy. We are in this room. We have a huge screen. We are reading what you all put. You're part of this community. We're all here together. So please continue to engage with us. And we will be going to you in just a couple moments and inviting some reflections. So that's me pre-warning gently for those of you who need a little bit of grounding and maybe kind of start to think about if you want to share your voice in a space, okay? But essentially, this is our thesis. We are inviting you to let go of any idea, any conception that there is one right way to pursue your research journey at whatever level you are, at whatever stage. We are going to, part of the way we want to do this is we love to take a strengths-based approach with everything. So for some of you who've been in conversations with us or been coached by us or just in relationship and friendship with us, you know that we are first going to invite you to reflect on what's already working, what's something you're already crushing it at, right? We want, the way I like to talk about it is like helping you have clear eyes, right? A lot of us have really clear eyes when it comes to our friends. Like, oh my God, you're so amazing. Like, Katie, like we've been doing this all weekend. Like, oh my God, you're so amazing. I'm like, no, you're amazing. You're amazing, right? We love that. But part of what we get to develop with each other through community, through support, is also building that capacity to see ourselves more clearly, right? And of course, that means, of course, also recognizing our areas of growth, But from my experience, you're already good at that. You're already good at finding ways that areas you want to grow in or kind of gaps. But as a way for us to invite us to start this session from a strengths-based approach, I just want you to take a moment, just reflect on your past experiences. Perhaps it was when you were in a certain class or in a certain season of your life where from your research and writing perspective, you felt like, I was that girl. I was that guy. Like I was killing it. See if you could just presence when that was. And if for some of us, as you are thinking, somebody in here, either online or in the space, is gonna be like, I can't even think of nothing. Like it's been a hard road. And if that's you, I've been there before. I've been that person. And so if it's hard for you to reflect and be able to think about something in the past, simply think about that hope for the future. Just kind of sit and visualize for yourself kind of what you like, how do you like to relate to your research in your writing process. Okay, so just take a moment. And I'm actually going to invite, I love to hear from at least one person just to start, just to get some voices in the room, some other voices in the room. Will someone reflect back to us, just share a experience of memory, whether it was systems based or if it was about community, whatever memory came to you or spark a hope for the future about how you felt like things were working or how you like this to work. Yes, Christy.
For me, despite, being in a PhD now, I felt like that was when I was doing independent research. There was no administrative aspects, there was no boxes to tick. It was just pursue the research the way that I felt I could and at the speed that I wanted to. I could take my time, I could dedicate myself where I needed to. And I felt a lot more connection in that capacity as well as an independent researcher, because I just felt like, again, you just don't have the same kind of, you have other burdens, absolutely. But there's not these looming, deadlines that are based off of bureaucracy and having to handle things that are just taking you away from the research most of the time and adding a lot more stress and anxiety. Whereas actually it was just all about having fun and just seeing where the research took you. So yeah, big encourager.
Beautiful. And I'll come to you in just a moment. So I'm hearing a sense of almost like liberation that you felt, like this kind of the sense you kind of felt freed up. And then exploration, it was more about kind of the process and exploration than it really was about this specific design outcome. Yeah, beautiful. And then we'll go to one person. Yeah.
I'm gonna say the antithesis to that. When I was working on my doctoral dissertation, I barreled through it because the pressure, the stress, the deadlines, it kept me moving and kept me going, and it was so easy to stay on target. Now that I'm done and I need to get back to doing independent research, I am really struggling picking it up again. Because I'm like, where's the pressure? Where's the stress?
Oh, I very much relate to that. Yeah, so you were supported by kind of those external deadlines, that kind of external sense of pressure. And you felt that support, like those benchmarks, very clear benchmarks and timelines for you. Yeah. And we'll hear from one more person, but don't worry, y'all, we're gonna come back to y'all. But we'll hear from one person and then we'll move to our next speaker. Go ahead.
I just really kind of wanted to speak to both of those at the same time. So in college, I was a double major, triple minor, and worked like 2 jobs. I was in a sorority. I did so many things. So in that sense, I felt like I was on top of my game, but I completely burned myself out. I have a rare esophagus disorder, and my mom always joked that I was going to blow a gasket. I kind of did. Like, it was years later, but the junction between my esophagus and my stomach doesn't work right. And I feel like I kind of pushed too hard. So I was trying to think of like, well, I don't want to do that again. So I was actually thinking about kind of last year when I went to Inspiring Oxford. What I loved about that and thinking about that week versus even this last week, I had so much more pressure this time around because I have something upcoming versus last time I got to just be. I got to do it slowly and really like, that course was very like interdisciplinary. And then also at lunch and dinner, et cetera, we got to talk to so many other people in the other courses and share what we were learning about with that. Then also what they did outside work. It was all this community and slowness. And I got to like sit and sketch. And so I don't know yet how, like you were saying, to like combine the actually getting stuff done with the, that I had with the speed and pressure and all of that, with the actual slowness and comfort and enjoyment of, when I don't have that. But that's
Yeah.
really what I would ideally like to do. So.
Can I just like very quickly add on to that, because that summarizes it beautifully, because in research terms, that independent scholarly research, that freedom came from that. But I was also working part-time, and so the structure of the job then made my time spent on research much easier to go about, whereas in the PhD, I feel like that freedom is too much. And I'm like, someone tell me what to do, please.
Right, ground.
Polly.
Shut up, Polly.
So like summarize that.
Yeah. Beautiful. Oh, thank you all so much. Dr. Laura, I saw your hand, but I promise we're gonna come back to you, okay?
And we've like
Yes.
been reading, like I've been like keeping an eye on the chat as well. So like I hear you, the benchmarks, that space to think, that lack of judgment, these things are really important to name. So thank you
Yes.
so much if you've responded in the chat.
Yes, and I love to
Yeah.
just read at least one here. So
Yeah.
this was, let's say, I see Grace. Grace says, for me, presenting my undergraduate thesis, confident and excited to present my research. I did what I could, and that's good enough. And unapologetic, this is me, and here I am in what I love moment. Beautiful. Beautiful.
I love that, Grace.
I hope you heard that. Oh, Grace. The room is sending love to you. Thank you all. Keep going with the chat. We love and continue to affirm each other and love that. Hi.
Thank you so much for that. And I think it's so like, I really appreciate the voices online, really appreciate those reflections in the room. Like what we're kind of working towards now is like how do we make those sustainable? Like how do we care for ourselves? How do we care for our bodies? How do we enjoy this? Maybe like the buzz, those kind of all of the kind of the excitement, the energy we get from what's going on. But how do we embody that? Like Christy, I've been thinking a lot about that amazing reflection that you gave in the panel yesterday afternoon about how to move through this and just take a breath and slowly. How do we make all of these things go through and work for us? How do we understand what works for us? It's kind of trial and error.
Yes.
But
We're going to practice and explore that today.
Exactly. I was
Yeah.
going to say, so this is where we'll be. We'll be thinking these things through for the rest. Like beautiful. We've got 40 minutes left together here. We want to offer some like gentle prompts that we hope you'll engage with, that we hope you'll enjoy, that we hope you'll resonate with. So these prompts are kind of like little invitations to think through some of these questions that have come up through this session so far. Right? How to create those workflows, those systems, those routines, those research rhythms that really support us. So to do that, we've got this idea of these 3 anchors. So these are 3 like tethers. You might think of them as like pillars, like are lifting you up, that are supporting you. You might think of them as grounding anchors, so we don't lose our way. We know we can always come back to our center, to ourselves. However you want to picture these are like 3 prompts that we feel will support you in your well-being. And like we all know, like the best routines, they're changeable, they're open, they're flexible. Yes. Our routines need to change because we do. Like our like life throws curveballs sometimes, right? Like and our routines need to be open, need to be flexible to change as our research does and as we do. So these things can change, but we hope by giving this idea of like anchors, these tethers, they'll keep us steady. they'll like show us the way to come back to ourselves when we do feel burnt out, when we do feel unsettled, when we do feel unwarmed. So these are our like 3 anchors that we're going to think through today. So we've got our first one, personal rhythms, our second, support systems that we need. And then we're going to think through this idea of a project flow. And to do this, just to give you like an idea of like the shape of the rest of the session, we're going to move through these. We're going to offer a few examples. And then if you've got like journals out, or if you want to like think through this, just privately, keep things close to you and just sound things out in your thoughts. Or if you've got a laptop, feel free to type away. We'll have, yeah, or in the chat, like please pop them. Like we'll be keeping an eye on the chat as well. So we're going to have some time to reflect and try to think through what each of these might be for you. And then after that, we're going to invite everyone to come together. We'd love to hear again from as many voices as possible, and to kind of connect, to share our knowledge, to share our wisdom, to inspire some connection that way. So that's the shape of the rest of the session. We hope you enjoy. So I'll hand over to Clea now to take us through our first anchor, this idea of personal rhythms.
So our first anchor is personal rhythms. And this is where we are going to continue to invite you to center yourself. For some of us, that feels very radical. You live a life, you live a generous life, you show up for everyone, you are accommodating, you're like the bestie, you're the strong friend, right? But what we want you to do is when you're thinking about your own research process, we want you to think about, what do I know about this? Like, what do I truly know about myself that I can utilize, that I can really present to make good decisions for myself around, right? So, because as probably already talked about, a lot of us, especially, like I love YouTube as much as anybody. A lot of us are in this room because of YouTube, right? I mean, we have some 5 a.m. girlies here. Kate's not in the room right now. Y'all, represent. Let me tell y'all, I wanted to be y'all so bad. And it kept messing me up. Because I wanted to be y'all so bad, but that was not actually inherent to rhythms that I had for myself, right? I was navigating chronic illness, chronic pain, different things where I needed to, instead of me getting up at 5 a.m. and writing like I wanted to, because I was watching girls on YouTube getting up at 5 a.m. and writing. I thought that was so cool. Like, instead of me just being like, girl, you need to get a hot water bottle. Right? Like, you need to take your time. Right? Instead of doing that, I was like, no, but I got to do this. And I took years. I know I'm funny and it sounds funny, but for real, y'all. Like, I literally spent years trying to contort myself to be someone else, to actually, go ahead.
In the chat, they're asking how the 5 a.m.ers do it. Here's what I want to say.
Sleep. We are asleep at like 7.
Well, what I want to say is that if you want to change when you wake up, you do it incrementally. You don't just put your clock to get up at 5 a.m. You have to take your normal clock, go back 15 minutes, and then go back 15 more minutes, and you just keep doing it incrementally.
Yes.
So if you want to be a 5 a.m. girly,
So Hannah, I love that offering, and I love that this is getting y'all activated.
Yeah.
And that is absolutely true, right? So what I'm not saying is that it's not possible. Like, I just came in from California. I don't know what time it is. Like, I don't even know what time it is, right? And I'm standing before you with a full face of makeup on. But like, at the same time, what we are saying is, right, there may be some unique rhythms to your life, right? Maybe you're caregiving. Maybe there's particular thing that it's really, what's driving you is what's important. I think that's what I want to say, right? So in my examples, I was more worried about what I saw and what I thought was the right way, right? So it wasn't just that I inherently wanted to be a 5 a.m. girly. It was more about the external messages that I received with people who most likely were being authentic to them. Let's be clear. That's why I love y'all, 5 a.m. girlies, because that is authentic to you. But if I'm contorting myself to actually try to take on a different identity that's actually not supporting my well-being, who am I serving? Right? But thank you. Like, who am I serving? I love right. Yeah, let's go. Right? Let's have a real conversation. Because right, like that might seem like a kind of like little cute, funny entryway to talk about it, but really think about this. You can probably think about a lot of things in your life, in your experience, where if you really paused and thought, you're like, am I really being true to myself? Or did I pick that up along the way? Is that something unconsciously that has gotten, is this about social conditioning? Or is this about me honoring who I am? And so what we're inviting is for you, whatever it is, there's no one right way. Whatever that is to honor yourself. Lainey, go ahead.
So just to add to what you're saying, I've made a lot of positive changes in my life, but one of the things that happened for a very long time when I started making those positive changes was I thought I had to eradicate the negative stuff that I thought was gonna give it about me and be that other thing, you know, that poised, graceful girl who like shows up in the right outfits, always says the right words, you know. And it wasn't until I was like, you're just kind of like the white trash girl from Boston, and that's just who you are. And some people are never gonna be okay with that. But when I am that person all of the time, that's when I get to be the best version of who I am.
Hey, lady, you're a classy bitch. Don't let anyone.
Thank you, thank you. I am a classy bitch,
I
right?
wanted to really quickly just shout out also to the Starlight Scholars. Our thing, we have a 5 a.m. girly and a 9 p.m. girly, and we have them at the same time.
Yes.
And I strongly recommend having more of this. It's okay to be a night owl. That's the thing. I tried to push myself to be an early bird and I couldn't, but I easily.
What part of the aviary?
Like a midnight.
Can we do a midnight call? So
Shout out to all the owls can do midnight.
It's 11 a.m. when Kate's doing 5 a.m. in my time zone.
But it's actually 11 midnight in ours.
Yeah.
And that's when I joined.
Yeah.
So it's whatever works for us.
Right. Okay, so y'all got this first anchor, right? The first anchor is you attuning to what works for you,
You
right?
need to write it down.
All right, write it, yes, literally journal. We're inviting you if that supports you, actually write it down, right? Or go ahead.
Can I just also, just because I know we're reflecting on kind of rhythms and schedules, but I think it's also very important to remember that those schedules change and you need to be flexible about that as well, because I know for myself, when it comes to the darker months, I can be the 5 a.m. girly and I enjoy being that girly, but then when it's summertime, I hate the summer, I hate the daylight. But you know, I'm gonna be waking up at like 10 a.m. and you know, and then I have to completely come back to my schedule and look at it again and figure out what is best at this particular season of life, both in terms of like nature seasons, but also like, you know, metaphorical seasons within your life. So something might work for you and it might work for you for a good amount of time, but then it might stop working for you. And so you need to have that flexibility to be able to shift and try out some new things and see what then might be something to take forward. And then you can always go back and see if the thing that worked for you last time. So it's all about having that understanding of your rhythms, but then also understanding when you start to feel like they're not working for you anymore and where to be able to transition and shift. So that way you don't completely hit a wall kind of.
This is a everyday question. For me, this is a multiple times a day question. Right? So it's not about being prescriptive about, oh, this is what I have to be for this whole semester, this whole year, even this whole month. It's about self-inquiry, right? The invitation is to actually pause, slow down, which Christy has invited us to do yesterday, enough to be able to tune with, okay, like, what do I need? What in this season, in this moment, in this day, whether, you know, things are dynamic. So absolutely. Okay, y'all got it. Y'all got the personal rhythm. All right, let's go to the next one, Polly.
We've got, okay. So it's kind of like, these are all interlinked and like enmeshed, right?
But I think we're like researchers here. We love to like break things down and look at them and like really like think about them in depth. So we're gonna continue to do that.
And thank y'all in the chat. We see you. Thank you, Shia, for speaking about your experience with chronic illness, needing to work in the mornings. Absolutely.
There was also a lot of love for you in the chat, ladies. There was a lot of like shout outs. I don't know whether you saw that, but a lot.
Thank
you. So yeah. Speaking of like support in the chat, let's think about support systems. And this anchor is to say, and I think we know this, like we're part of Accepted here, we're all part of this community. I hope that we know we don't have to do this alone, right? Maybe it's something like, like we're stepping towards that, we're hearing people say this, the like word, that beautiful word community was discussed a lot yesterday. Perhaps we're still thinking this through, what it can mean, what it can do for us, what we can do for it. But I hope we know we don't have to do this alone. Support systems, like these are things get brought up, we're like familiar with this phrase, right? But I think we wanted to like anchor this in particular to say like support can look different for different folk. In the same way that like we've got like a 9 p.m. gal here, we've got our 5 a.m. crowd at the back. This is wonderful. Like also support looks different for different folk. It takes different shapes and forms. We need different forms of support through different seasons in our life, in our research as well. An intense research phase, reading phase takes different levels of support to an intense writing deadline. We know this. So let's give ourselves that. Let's be open to change, but let's think about this anchor. What do we need? Support for me is like human connection. Like I know I'm having a bad moment if I'm like not responding to messages, if I'm anxious about being on WhatsApp, if I'm not talking to my loved ones, to my friends, to my family. I know that things are rocky if I'm not doing that. And they like, it gets harder as well. Like the more you do that, the more you kind of like turn inwards and like self-isolate almost. I know that my support system involves people and community. The support could also be like, shout out Katie's incredible crocheting and knitting. Yes. And like, this is phenomenal, right? It could be like, it could be whatever serves you. Kate and I we're talking about like the joy of like cooking and like nourishing our bodies and like what like food does to us in like and the cooking process in general. Whatever it means. It could be having some time away from our screen. It could be like more support, could look like more support from your tutor or your supervisor. It can look different at different points in time and for different people. So we'd like to think through, and I'd love like if people are happy to like share like in the chat, or if Joangeli, I see you, I'd love to hear from you. I was gonna say, I'd like to invite if like what does support look like for you? Is there a place that you feel like you're missing that sense of support? What does support mean? What could it mean? Joangeli, I'd love to hear from you.
As a counselor, or as a mental health professional where I'm at, I live in rural North Texas.
Yeah.
And a lot of people do depend on me and the nonprofit. And so there aren't a lot of places I can turn. I have a good team, but they don't always get it. And so when I'm not on AS for an extended period of time, I complete. And I realized that I think after my last talk with you, and so even when I was driving down to Austin, I actually tuned in to one of Kalia's events. I couldn't be typing, but they were there and I could hear them. And it made the trip not as intense for me. And so, I mean, you guys have become my support system. So.
Very honored to be so. Thank you, Joangeli. That means the world.
This is for folks who have maybe partners or roommates. Something that my husband and I have talked a lot about is not necessarily an equal division of labor, but an equitable division of labor. And so even though my husband is in graduate school, he still does a lot in the household because I have ADHD and he knows it. He knows that it's not a crime. So when we do things like chores, which are really difficult for me, we don't do 50-50 in terms of like, if you do this chore, I'll do that chore. We do 50-50 in terms of I like to start a chore and he'll finish the chore.
There we
Because
go.
I'm very, so it's what is equitable, right? How can you shape those routines with other people in your household that work within each other's flows? It's like, for example, my husband hates folding laundry and he won't do it. I will not wash the laundry to save my life. So I sort, he washes, I fold and put away,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
It doesn't have to be a one task per like a, yeah. So thinking about how you break things up in maybe a way that doesn't look traditional. Yeah.
Anna, yeah.
I have young children and I work a lot. And so I feel like very guilty about how little time I spend with my kids. And so I found that I have to reframe what that looks like for me. So I may not pick up my kids after school and I may not be the one that's checking off all the little worksheets and whatever. But like I find ways to meaningfully connect with my kids and I just allow myself to feel like that's good enough. And that's really fucking hard. And so my husband reminds me all the time, like, you have these incredible memories with them and you do all this stuff for them. And Joe can tell you, I have a flipping problem about buying my kids books because like I just could just buy my kids books all day. And I think about them all the time. And so I'm trying to find ways to connect with them that's like that maybe they'll remember when they think about how their mom wasn't there for some stuff. They'll remember other things. And that I wouldn't have that without my husband being such a good partner and valuing my relationship with them too. And taking on the task of being the one that picks them up from school and signs off on the worksheets.
And if I can bounce off of that, you know, we don't want to just say that your partner has to be good or whatever. It's how do you communicate to them what you need? Because, you know, my husband's older, everybody knows. And the main reason that I'm doing this is because he's going to retire and it's his turn. And so I'll have to remind him every so often when he feels a little grumpy or, you know, can you please do this? And I have to not take it personally because I know that he's just tired. So when you're talking with your person, Hannah's got an incredible partner. She's also at a different stage of life than I am. What Katie said about her partner, you know, they're at a different stage too. Just being able to talk like Christy's husband, you know, the things that he does for her. So I guess what I'm trying to say is just, you know, just being able to talk to them.
What I'm kind of saying, I'm also a mom, my son is just turning 3 and my husband is truly one of the biggest support systems that I have. I'm from Ukraine and majority of Ukrainian women have a more traditional way of thinking about motherhood is that the mother stays at home and the husband provides, whereas in our family, it's the opposite. And my husband it's hard for him to take care of our son, but we try to communicate as much as we can. And I feel like one of the biggest things that I got out of this experience is that we should not let the traditional mindset affect us. And we need to do what works for us and for our families and for our loved ones. So that's something that, you know, it's been really important for me.
we'll hear from Dalton and then we'll go to the next one and we'll have some more conversation as well.
I think like I am a very different stages of life than motherhood.
Well said.
But you and me both, though.
But like I live with a roommate by myself. I live in Boston, my family lives in Texas. We're very far apart. I'm the first one in my family to go to even walk in the foot of the door of a university. With that being said, my parents, they want to support me and they're like, okay, you're doing it, good job. But they don't understand what I'm going through at the same time or why I want to do it because I'm already in industry and have my job. So for them, they're like, why are you doing this? I don't get it. Why are you torturing yourself? But for me, setting those support systems and those boundaries as well, my roommate, some of you might have seen him because he'll pop in the door behind me in my room when I'm on a Zoom call and he'll be like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. And I'm like, no, come say hi. But I'll sit down there and I have my headphones on and I'm in the zone for that. And sometimes I just need the quiet moment of being alone to focus on that because my brain is 1,000 things coming at me at once. And I can't even have lyrics in my music because that will pull me aside. And I need the focus and to look forward and to say, this is my time to write, this is my time to focus in on what I need to do. If I don't set those boundaries to tell everybody else to leave me alone, then I won't get to where I need to do that.
Sometimes support is setting those boundaries and knowing and naming what you need. I'm also just gonna quickly shout out some of the things we've been seeing in the chat that like there are such lovely like crossovers and overlaps with exactly what we're saying here. So sometimes support looks like watching a comfort movie or a comfort show. Sometimes support looks like it's I think there was someone that said it's about being emotionally safe and supported. Gosh, that's beautiful. Like that's the core of what we're saying here, isn't it?
Yeah, someone
Yeah.
said specifically about being able to be with a friend in silence.
Yeah.
Like
yeah,
actually just
yeah.
be, right? Beautiful.
It's incredible. And thank you so much for all of this. This is excellent. Our third anchor.
Yeah, so this is our last anchor
Our
we want to
last, yeah.
offer you is we're calling it Project Flow. But what we want you to think about is what do you need? What would be an entry point? What might support momentum for you? So if you could think about a specific project you're working on right now, or maybe you desire to. I know we were talking to Katie about wanting to have a desire of kind of returning to some work, but the thought of like writing and getting back to it can feel a bit overwhelming. So what would be an opportunity for you to permission yourself? So these could be, we want to get really practical. So I'll give an example of something that really supported me in shifting from deep writing anxiety, just a personal story. When I was working on my dissertation, it was about 3 years between actually finishing my exams and being permission to go forward and propose a dissertation. It took me about 3 years to get there because I kept for every month, I kept making the same big goal, which was like a whole big chapter, but I had the same goal every month for over a year. It took my therapist inviting me to think about why have you been given the same goal and I was like, because I'm behind. So I have, in my mind, logically, if I'm behind, then of course I have to make that chapter still my goal every week. But what that did was just lead to more anxiety. Over time, though, I shifted, and my goal was, because what was happening was I had anxiety even opening up my document. So I literally made it a goal, right? Exposure therapy for some of us to know that. It was literally, I just have to at least, for a week, the experiment was just open your document 3 times this week and see what happens. A week later, open your document, write 1 sentence, right? then I moved up, and it would have been, and so one thing that was happening was when it was time for my writing to happen, I was kind of more comfortable a little bit, but I was still getting caught up in wanting the end result. So it felt a little unsatisfying for me just to write something if it wasn't beautiful prose. Right? Because I love beautiful writing. So it was like, did I really write if it's ugly? Like if the syntax is off, did I really write? Was it really purposeful? So I had to actually build capacity to decide, no, your goal today is to write a paragraph, a brained up paragraph. So I would have to signal to myself this thing, right? And then it would be like, okay, today your goal could be to revise that paragraph. But I had to give myself entry points and I had to give myself permission to get in a flow. And through that, ultimately, more trust became, right? Because next thing you know, we know like things will compound over time. But if I would have just stayed stuck completely with, oh, this one, and by the way, I can write that chapter because I didn't know what to do. Like I didn't have enough questions and enough self-trust, right? So I just want to offer for you all, as we're thinking about what would help you sustain some momentum in a project that you're working on or might want to work on, what would an entry point look like? What would be maybe that permissioning that you might need? Or maybe you've done this in the past and you can just reflect and share with the group. Yeah.
Okay, so as you were speaking, I was thinking about what I tell my community college students, because a lot of them come with the same anxieties when they enter a paper. And so I'll tell them, you don't even have to start writing the paper. Open up a document or get out a piece of paper and write down how you're frustrated. Even if it's, I hate this teacher, she's making me do this. Like, why would I have to write this paper? It makes no sense. I have to write about this and this. And I'm like, and then step away.
Yeah.
And then even later in the day, or if it takes 2 days to get back to it, reread that. And then your body will be like, oh, I was very frustrated, right? And then even going through and reading what you're frustrated with about it, it gives you more of a foundation of what you know you then need to start writing.
Right.
And so, yeah, and like even with me, for students who aren't necessarily frustrated, but they have the anxiety of just even getting something on a page, I'm like, don't even focus on the nitty gritty of the research assignment. Write your title page down. And I have it formatted for them and I'm like, copy and paste that and just put in your own information. And then if that's all you get done that day, that's all you get done. So something like that where like you tackle and you wrestle with your frustrations and then it gives some kind of like sense of like, it's okay to be frustrated and I can re-enter this later.
Beautiful. And I'm so thankful those students have you.
Oh, thank you.
Seriously. Truly. Dr. Laura and then.
So a couple of things. One, always been terrified of the blank page and the blinking cursor.
I feel that.
Right? So one of the things for me is finding an environment on my computer that I am kind of comfortable in, which for me is email. So I open up an email message. I make it whatever size, just like I'm typing an email, and I just start typing. It doesn't matter to who, it's just saved in drafts, so I don't have to I can even send it to myself, I don't have to. And you just start typing, and then all of a sudden I've got all these words that I can now cut and paste and put into a Word document that is no longer blank.
I love that. That's a great example of entry point. Yeah. I saw Lainey first and then.
So, my last meeting with Kaylin for the research group, she told me to work on an anecdote for my intro. And I felt like that was some of the best advice because an anecdote is something that like I will emotionally connect with. And it's also to get other people to emotionally connect with your research, but like it's the one part where I can have that emotional connection to that makes it easier for me. Because so I have ADHD, so blank screens don't bother me because I'm just gonna fill it with gibberish and then realize that it's gibberish and have to go back and actually, like, I will write 4 pages and be like, I haven't looked at one book, one quote, or one like source to make sure that I actually know what I'm talking about, and then I have to go back and actually do it correctly. So, but just that ability to like emotionally connect with what I'm writing first sort of lets everything else flow from there.
Oh, Okay, I saw like 4 hands, so. See Meg.
Shall I go?
I was gonna say, something gotta say.
Someone else. Sometimes I get really overwhelmed by looking at the day and going, okay, I want to have got done this many hours worth of work in the day. And because it's so overwhelming, I then procrastinate about starting full stop. So on my last deadline, I actually got into the habit of using just the timer that's on the normal laptops. And I would set it for either between 20 minutes to an hour, depending on what time I'd got. And then rather than setting myself a schedule for the day, every time I was gonna check my phone or check an email, I had to press pause on the timer so it wasn't logging unused time. And then I had to keep a tally chart of how long I'd been working that day. So then when I got to the end of the day, I could be like, oh my goodness, I actually managed to get like 5 hours of work done, rather than starting out the day going, I have to get 5 hours of work done, because then I just wouldn't start it at all. And that's become a really like sustainable practice, which changed my whole experience towards getting to the deadline. So I'm hoping to kind of try using that again in the future. But yeah.
I know I had a thought and the thought is like kind of there still. There was something more to be added to it, so I will just say the basic thought. And preface to the thought. It's something that came from PhD program, and that is like, I have anxiety around, oh, the thought's back. Okay, I've got the two things. So it's both to do with approaching that writing, and it's, I get very anxious about opening up specifically a blank document on the screen. It feels like professional. It feels like I'm about to start an essay. I'm about to do something that's important. Whereas with PH done through the free writing exercises in particular, that started to help me feel less anxious about approaching writing to begin with. Like it's just, it is that allowing yourself to do the messy thinking that you think like, oh, it might be scrapped entirely. I'm not adding all the citations in and things here and there, but actually doing it that way, having it like on a paper, like in a notebook, tangibly, that so you're really connected to the page and you're connected to the research. Most of the time, I then am able to just take that and input it directly into a document and then flesh it out, and it's so much easier. And so that kind of made me find the process of, despite having a tattoo that literally says write on it, like enjoy the writing process again. But I think the second kind of part of that is actually something that came out of the Artist Way group, and that was creating writing as a daily habit. That is what then made me enjoy and approach free writing in a lot more like excitement, and not something that, because even previously free writing was anxiety inducing.
Yeah.
So by just forcing myself to do 15 minutes of like just thoughts on a page, it's that the next time when I get to do something, even if it's research related, I'm not feeling anxious about the physical act of writing. My body is just immediately going into that, and I'm just dumping, instead of all the daily things that I have to do, it's just dumping all the daily research thoughts that are there. So it just makes the process a lot more enjoyable. And I think that honestly, free writing in a notebook is the only reason I have words in a chapter draft. And I am so grateful for PH done for applying that as a daily practice, because it is through that consistent practice that anxiety reduces, and it becomes a habit that then is part of the writing process. And it always has been part of it, but we do it with a lot more intention and grace now than maybe we did originally.
I really want to I will summarize very quick. I have way more than I could say, but I just want to bring this back to what you said about personal rhythms.
Yes.
And the important thing, like the project flow, like that same concept of there is no one right way. You do not have to do the right way, the normal way. I think that's been very, very important for me. And to your point, I'll really quickly use one example about like, I read this about actually ADHD, and like a lot of people with ADHD have a hard time showering. And for me, like, I actually like showering when I'm in the shower, but the process of initiating the task, it sounds like so much effort. And I read something that was like, you can trick your brain, like, you know how you have time blindness? You can trick your brain by saying, oh, I don't have to shower. I just have to turn the water on. I don't have to shower. I just need to take my clothes off. I don't have to shower. I just need to get in. And the next thing I know, I've started. So that idea of breaking down this thing that seems overwhelming and like too big into like little tiny things, and not even just like, oh, here's the tiny things, just literally the first one.
Open up your book.
Open up your book, open up, I use text edit, open up
Oh, yeah.
text edit. And all I have to do, like the next one's like, I just have to write for 15 minutes. It doesn't have to be on anything. It can be whatever it is. And then, oh, look, I just happen to get going. And the next thing I know, I've written something. So.
On the idea of rhythms, we've had so many conversations about this. But for the longest time, I used to think like, oh, I have to write 500 words a day. That's what my advisor told me I need to do. Like, I need to write however many hours a day. And I need to have a full draft before I can revise it. And the amount of advice that I like see in comments or see like in other content is like, you know, just get the full draft, get a big ugly draft together. And I'm like, that does not work for my process. It never has. And I just got to the point where I was like, okay, well, what worked in community college? What worked in university? And to me, like writing is this like building up pressure. And I was here for an entire week with Kate, like a month or two ago. And every day I'd go to the library and like, I was like, I can't write. But I just like pulled out a notebook and I started this dissertation diary. And it was just like a random hubbub of like ideas and whatever the hell I wanted to put in there. And it could be like ranting about one of the guys that I'm like researching and being annoyed with him, or like talking about how this one scholar has this theory that I think is batshit crazy. And like I would do like mind maps of historiography or like anything. It could be an image, it could be a mind map, it could be a reflection on how frustrated I am. And it was just like, it felt like I needed to just let myself go through that process of like letting the pressure come up so then I could write. And it's not terribly reliable as a process, but all of the advice of like, oh, you have to do it this way, or it has to look this way, or like, oh, you just need to get an ugly draft together. I was like, I have never written a full ugly draft in my freaking life. Like I can write a paragraph and then I'll edit that paragraph and edit it and edit it and edit it. And it's even with writing and editing, it's this process of like, even the revision is like, I read through it, I edit, I copy edit, I like redo it, I redo it. And I'm just like building the pressure until like, okay, this is good. Now I can move on to the next paragraph. And it's just this process that I'm like, it worked back then. Why can't it work now? I just, it's like a slightly different expectation of what the project looks like. And, and obviously the volume is different. And the quote unquote, like quality is different. But if you just trust that, like, this process that has served me from the beginning, that works for my brain apparently, and doesn't seem to work for other people, but like, fair enough.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't need to look a certain way. It doesn't need to feel a certain way. It just needs to be this process that like feels fulfilling to me and feels like it's in alignment with like my brain, my needs, where I want the writing to be, and what that momentum looks like for me.
And if I can just jump in really quick, as non-traditional, working and doing all the things that I'm doing, oftentimes the free writings and PhD literally focuses me. Like Kalia will go or Polly will go and I'll say, I've got this, this, and this, but where am I going to do this? Where am I going to write? Where am I going to do this? And it's lovely to have somebody go, well, what if we do just an hour a day? What if we, okay, so tell me about your week. It helps have somebody out there because I'm working, I'm doing all the things and I'm organizing all the things. to have somebody help me organize me, if that
Yeah.
makes sense. So it's not that I don't have a rhythm, it's I have too much rhythm. And I need somebody to go, "Oh, okay, let's just breathe. Okay, what needs to happen? Kind of a thing. So PH done, I talk about it all the time. I'm where I'm at. I'm almost there.
Yeah, you are.
And a lot of it is because of you guys.
Quick, I mean, what I'm hearing here, and a number of you have said this in your comments, is that term momentum. And we've all been told that writing is building momentum, it's building momentum, and then it kind of creates a, a flow of its own. But I think the thing that we're never told is okay to have is that momentum looks different for everybody.
Yes.
And what it takes for you to build your momentum is going to be different than what it takes other people. And leaning into that is okay.
So true. I am just in terms of, and I hope that this conversation will like continue into the break and like maybe beyond this weekend, like maybe let it sit for a while and we can come back to these thoughts. We can continue these connections, continue these conversations. Just to say like, thank you so much for sharing all of this in the chat. We see you. Thank you for everyone that's been a part of this, whether you said something out loud, whether you've been thinking this through quietly. We're so appreciative. And I think we're all saying the same thing. We're all under, like, it's about taking the pressure off in order to find the joy.
Exactly.
Be as close to that joy as possible and acknowledging that progress and momentum mean different things for different folks. We've got a few enjoyed such a rich, lively session. And we might share the in circle to kind of think through some of these questions here, but that just kind of continue like inviting you to reflect on like what would that like flexible, sustainable research rhythm be like? What might that feel like for this moment in time, for this season? But for now, we'd love to
Yes.
invite.
So the kind of final invitation we just want to offer you all is just to think tangibly, practically, if there was just one next step that you took from this conversation, maybe a reflection came in terms of how you want to honor, whether it's your personal rhythms, your support system, what's the entryway of momentum building for you. Just identify one small thing, because we come to these spaces, they're beautiful, we jump on Zoom, we spend this time, we get inspired. But what's important is that we take that next step, right, in practice. And we really believe that just one tangible next step is enough. And then what happens? We go another step, and then another step, and another step. So I'd love to just hear from one person because we're over time. But if there's one person that we could just hear from, and of course, we'd love to get it from the chat as well. But if you can just think about as you leave this space, when you think about going back home, getting back into the room, what's like one commitment you want to make to yourself? Focus on your rhythms, your support system, your sustained momentum. Don't get quiet now. Y'all been talking the whole time. Okay.
I think like definitely listening to personal rhythms, because I think I have boxed myself into like, oh, I should have a schedule, right? And this takes me like throughout this conversation, I've been thinking one of the first conversations I had with Malia when I first met her the first day, we were talking about like students' eating times and how there was like Lauren, I don't know if she's here, but she's a high school teacher and like talking about how students will like make excuses to go to the bathroom and they'll like go to find snacks. And it's just like learning those personal rhythms of like, we're not gonna all eat at the same time. And like, I think like institutionalized trauma in that way of like having to fit a certain schedule, even if it doesn't work for us, like unlearning that and like being willing to listen to myself and like not have to fit that box or do it the right way.
Yes.
Yeah, let's do that.
Thank you so much for that. I think that sums this session up perfectly. So I'm really grateful to like end on these words. you again to everyone for engaging, for participating. If you, and really where we all wanna like relax into our break and I'm conscious of time. But just to say, if you've enjoyed thinking in this way, if you've enjoyed this conversation, and if you're moving through a PhD program, please do feel free to check out PH Done. It's, as we said at the start, we've had some beautiful reflections from some of our valued treasured members in the room. It's a doctoral completion program that kind of like, it's not like coaching, not mentoring, not all of the above. And it kind of has these structured writing retreats, these spaces for connection on group calls and one-on-one with Kalia, with myself. These incredible resources, including shout out Kaylin's incredible Notion skills, my goodness, that's beautiful template. So if you are interested, please do have a little look online and come along and chat to Kalia and myself in the break or throughout the day. Or drop us an email as well. So yeah, thank you again for coming along today.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much. So I think we now have a little break. I'm sorry we've taken 5 minutes away from that break, but I'm glad that we did for that conversation. But then I think we're back at
Yes,
right.
that's correct. Go to about 10 minutes, we come back to 3 weeks.
Thank you.
This morning, like, because I think. Like, thinking about it, and I was like, you know what?
Letter to your
Pants that I didn't have but I didn't even bother wearing. And, I'm just gonna like exist for a minute, you know? Like ADHD, she's a therapist, but she goes, she's just trying to get my shit together. She's like, there's some food in your fridge. She's like, yes. And she's like, what's your goal for this trip? Like, my goal for this trip is to not get distracted by the right thing now. And just miss all of it, because that's just like,
Yeah.
you know, it's like, that's the thing with dating, it's not that like I'm distractible, it's that like it's happening right now. I say what I have to do.
That was my third.
That is your turn.
Let's go.
Oh, I'm not letting you go till you're take a ride.
You know, and I'm like,
Yes, that sounds like a great idea.
I'd write everything. Yeah. But then it's like, well, future Lane, I think someone yesterday was talking about like their future self.
Yeah.
And I'm like, my future self hates my guts and definitely flying no times, but like I never give her the opportunity to actually have time to do it.
That's not much. Like. No.
Sorry.
Okay, I was just like, wait, have I so many notebooks that I forget what they are?
I feel like you need to do something like singing performance for us today with that jacket. No, right.
It's brilliant.
That's the one thing that I won't do.
No, I heard, clip from Denzel Washington.
No, God damn it.
Thank you so much.
Don't
It's not tax deductible.
You gotta keep everybody hydrated, you know?
I'm leaving that starting to become.
I have a Titan. You know, one of her, which is like extremely grown up for me. I have a Titan and a nail.
They moved to Sacramento. They came back, she finally finished, graduated.
Still like
moving back.
I love that you bought those sneakers.
Yeah. I'm really happy about that. Yeah. So I was so happy to hear that.
I destroyed the shit out of them.
That's what they're meant to do.
It's like.
Guess I should have put on my
One split, but another.
So I bought a pair of Sambas after they were,
That's the
I
thing.
thought it was quicker and easier, and they were counter.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
And I have
Like
several
the
friends
second
who
I
like
touched
on
them,
it,
I was like, no, that's not.
Right.
One from a kind.
I brought, I was like, oh, shoes.
Yeah.
I was talking about the back of the truck. Why? I'm starting to get blisters. I'm like,
Yeah.
So like I somehow managed to give myself blisters with them and I think it's because my socks were too low.
Is that a seller?
No, it was actual Amazon. Safety blisters.
Yeah, the bag, part of the day. I don't think the classic white ones have been the power.
Yeah.
When did you exactly send you? Okay.
I had a pair of white ones.
I guess they're kind of.
And then last year here, I got a pair of white and red ones that I never wear. I don't know why, I was like, buy white ones.
I was like, I'm gonna get extra week.
Oh, good. I wish.
I told school flip it out. I don't ask for. I basically just replaced it with the shit and I'm gonna be back. It's later. It's like, it's not black.
Finally starting
Yeah.
I have
You're serving the
colors now.
So if you go, and we're always like, you need to wear color, you need to smile, you're an adult now, you're, yeah.
Two or.
Me, and then I told my boss.
Yeah.
All right, everyone, welcome back into the space. We are going to be kicking off the 3-minute thesis presentation. This is a really, really exciting event, as Kaylin mentioned. It is not a competition. It is nothing along those lines. It is just a really exciting way for the members to share their research, to share what they're working on, and to practice their elevator pitches on their research. I know Christy had to step out for a second, but I did want to just flag a big thank you to her for her help in preparing the participants for this session. And I am really, really looking forward to hearing what we have on the go. So we're going to start with our online participants, and then we'll move to our in-person participants. So I will be keeping very strict time on all of you. And I will let you know when that timer starts. So first participant we are going to hear from is Maria. Maria, I'm going to ask you to come off mute and to turn your screen on if it's not already on.
Thank you to everyone.
There you are. Hi, Maria.
Hi. I'm Maria Antonietta. I'm a PhD student at the second year in the University of Parma in Italy.
Amazing, Maria. Welcome. We're very, very excited to hear about your research. I'll be starting the timer now.
Okay. Imagine if I asked you to find the right path in an unfamiliar place. What would you say? What if I told you that many other people are traveling with you and that you are their guide, but you haven't any further information or a compass or a map and the skills needed to read it? Many of us wouldn't feel ready. We think we needed experience to know the route, to know our traveling companions, and to have a plan for how to get to our destination. My research investigates something very similar that sometimes occurs in Italian schools, where there are teachers who guide their colleagues. For example, in every school, a teacher is responsible to organize inclusive contexts and activities for students with special needs. But if we have a training program to become teacher, we have not a training program to become a middle manager. How it's possible? Disability studies researchers invite us to reflect on the importance of context and how we can make them even more inclusive. Middle manager at school, in Italy known as instrumental function, are responsible for this change. Often these teachers are unmotivated and feel their roles out of obligation. How we can guide our fellow travelers if we are not ready to do? It's important to define a training program for these teachers. So I investigate in qualitative research with an interpretative analysis them role and them skills. I analyze the perceptions of support teachers in training because I want to understand what they seek from their colleagues and how they imagine middle managers. The results are very interesting because the most recurring word in the answer is experience, but also training to understand the practices of the schools in which they work. I can say that teachers expect high quality middle managers. Changing context to guarantee the rights of people with special needs is everyone's responsibility, and a training program for middle manager must be designed. For the third year of my PhD, the research involves interviewing instrumental functions teachers to describe themselves, their roles, and my goal now is to outline their university training to become middle managers who guide the professional community with awareness and with a map, with a compass, and all the skills necessary to use them. Thank you for your attention.
Maria, you had 8 seconds. That is
Say
amazing.
thank you to you.
Thank you so much. It is absolutely fascinating. Just to say, anyone, if you have any questions on the research, please feel free to pop them in the chat. We will make sure they get to go to the presenters. Just to save on time, we probably won't get a chance to have a question and answer session with the presenters today, unless we have a little bit of time at the end. But please do keep your questions in mind or pop them in the chat, and we will make sure that they go to the presenters. Thank you, Maria. Thank you for kicking us off to such a great start. Next speaker. I do not know how to work on Microsoft. Caitlin, are you on the, are you on the meeting? If you are, can you come off the camera? Or maybe just let us know in the chat if you're here. We will get back to Caitlin when she joins. Nadia, I'm going to call on you for your research. If you just give me a second.
Can you all hear me okay?
We can.
Ooh, surprise, moving up in the line. Oh, I'm nervous now. Okay.
All right. I am going to begin your timer now.
All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you for your time and attention. My name is Nadia Dixon, and I'm a recent graduate of the University of Edinburgh with a master's in history, having focused my studies on the history of medicine in early modern England. I also have a master's in clinical mental health counseling, a bachelor's in anthropology, and work as a licensed psychotherapist in the United States. For my thesis challenge, I am sharing an overview of the research I conducted from my most recent master's dissertation, the title of which you can see on the slide. This research examines how noble women in 17th century England acquired the medical knowledge necessary to prepare domestic medicines. I also explore how women produced new medical knowledge and preserved this knowledge for future use. My work is based on various handwritten manuscripts, but also included printed medical text of the time. One small cream-colored manuscript that you can see on the slide prompted and informed most of the research I conducted. I utilize a combination of methodologies in my work, but rely heavily on what's called close reading of the manuscripts, which allows me to identify useful patterns and themes in the text to, of course, inform my research. This work looks at noticeable absences of detailed instructions in many of the recipe books and argues that these omissions are reflective of an assumed level of prior medical knowledge, including, but not limited to, familiarity with specialized technical equipment, botanical knowledge, and broader medical theory. My favorite aspect of the research examines how noble women actually acquired their medical knowledge. I found 3 primary modalities of learning. First was interpersonal transmission through oral instruction, personal writings, and direct mentorship. Second was embodied experimentation, which means that women refine their expertise through hands-on experimentation, adaptation, and customization. And third was the referencing of the printed medical manuals of the time. Overall, this research covers or offers a compelling lens through which to understand women's domestic medical expertise. It shows how manuscript recipe books were part of a much broader web of learning and showed how noble women were not simply preservers of medical knowledge, but active participants in its development and refinement. The findings of this study also offer insight into how knowledge systems function beyond institutional or elite male contexts. Women's domestic medical work then, often dismissed as amateur or simple, was found to be informed, evolving, and complex. And my hope is that this research can contribute to the growing field of study that seeks to highlight women's intellectual agency and contribution to the scientific efforts in the early modern period. Thank you.
Hey, you are all far too good at this. That was, Nadia, you got us right up to the time. Well done. Really, really thrilled. Thank you so, so much. That is such exciting research from an early modern scholar myself. I feel like we need to discuss this going forward. But next up on my list that I have here is Ayana. Ayana, are you with us? Yes, you are. Amazing. Oh shoot, sorry. Nadia, I'm gonna just stop spotlighting you for a second. Go.
We'll have to turn on her camera in order to get spotlighted.
Ayana, would you mind turning your camera on?
Okay, maybe we circle back.
Yeah. Ayana, we will come back to you when you are ready. So we will jump to Hannah in person. Yes.
Okay. Double checking. Maybe it's my timer.
No, not yet. It's so even. Let's just. You have to move on. Ready?
Yeah, I'm ready. I'm waiting on you, babe.
All right. Go.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Good morning to those online. Good wherever you are. My research pertains to how medical students are trained. Medical education is a scaffolded experience that builds on foundational knowledge, and then they move from that kind of entryway into more advanced critical thinking. This is going to include disease and pathophysiology diagnosis, and then pharmaceutical and anatomical changes. That is in and of itself a part of their learning, but they have a second component, which is clinical skills work. That is their ability to operate in a clinical environment, participate in surgery, the actual tactile things that they must be able to do to perform as a physician ethically and safely. Those skills are established by the AAMC as entrustable activities. Entrustable activities are basically what I just described, but there are these scaffolded, tangible concepts that we can say that by the end of your first term of medical school, you should be able to perform this task at this level. And then by the end of your second term, you will have advanced some. How we measure that and how we provide feedback to those students about those skills is something that is not captured on their board exams. So step 1, step 2, those big exams, they have nothing to do with your ability to perform professionally in a clinical space in a tactile way. So how we provide that feedback to them on the accuracy of their development is essential to their ability to perform in their clerkship years, which are their last 2 years of medical school, and then in residency. If they do not do that, they are unsafe to be near patients. And that, as we all know, only is going to hurt people. My research covers our ability as a medical school to say, we understand Kolb's experiential learning cycle. We understand Erickson's deliberate practice in concept, but in application, we're failing medical students because we are not appropriately assessing through formative to summative experiences their clinical skill development. It is not something we are regularly doing cleanly and very clearly from the entrustable activities from the AAMC to what they're doing in our workshops and in the medical curriculum. So my research is going to focus on what those opportunities look like formatively and how we link them to summative experience. Thank you. I thought it was like right there and I was like, all right.
On the money. Well done. Thank you so much. Maggie.
Everybody.
Hopefully you're all hearing bagpipes playing softly in the background. If you join any of my study sessions in the spring, you're familiar. Yeah. Public discourse and political debates during around national defense during the 7 Years' War triggered a shift in how Scots viewed themselves within the new and wider British identity. As the parity gap between England and Scotland closed post Anglo-Scottish Union, the anti-Scottish propaganda thrived. There was a flipping of the script of what Scottishness looks like. The militia debates between 1756 and 1763 underscored the broader anxieties of Scottish integration within what had mostly been to that point a very Anglo-British state. The Union had initially seen a push towards Anglicanization of Scots, but as the parity gap closed, concern for the loss of Scottish culture and identity grew. Print propaganda was used on both sides for decades leading up to the militia debates, and both sides used the same iconography in their propaganda to denote Scottishness. But at this point, the Scots had the Highland soldiers in Highland dress serving in the British Army in support of empire to underscore the martial heritage of the region and their value to the British state. Scottish elites, key Enlightenment thinkers, and others began to use the debates and as a way to address the question of Scottish identity and create a new idea of Scottishness centered on Highlandism that many had been distancing themselves from just a decade earlier. This was evident in the emergence of the Highland Society of London, the move towards Highland dress by some Scottish elites in London and Edinburgh, as well as in portraiture, literature, and poetry of the time. The significance of these debates and their role in the Highlandization of the Scottish identity is still apparent today, and that's why when you think of Scotland, this is likely the image you think of. And it's also incredibly present in pop culture and tourism. The goal of my research is to show the importance of this shift and the role of the militia debates to achieve it, as well as to help me move on to my next step in research, looking at 18th century travel writings of Scottish and foreigners and their perceptions of Scottish identity and how it shifted in 17th century and 18th century travel writings.
I bet no one's going over time. I was really hoping for like an opportunity.
Sheep's the cook.
Yeah, I mean, I want a gavel.
Oh,
Yeah. Right. Okay. Right. Imagine being a Christian parent torn between your faith and your love for your LGBTQ plus child. The tension between faith, belief, and acceptance is at the heart of my research. And I wanted to understand, would a single session of solution-focused narrative therapy impact the acceptance of LGBTQ children from their parents? So my study explores this through the use of SFNT, first by asking the question, does SFNT increase parental acceptance as measured by a scale called the LGBTQ plus acceptance scale? Second, how do parents describe their in-session experiences? What's happening to them experientially, internally, as we go through the session? And finally, what insights emerge when the two data sets are brought together so I can get a complete look at how we can better understand how faith, family dynamics, and identity intersect. And so in my methods, I'm using something called a mixed method convergence style, where I first do the quantitative data with a pre and a post test, and then I do the qualitative recording of the in-session intervention that I do with them between 60 and 90 minutes between each person. And then I look for patterns in what the parents say, throughout their journeys. So the key findings that I found so far is that preliminary results are promising. It shows parents experiencing measurable growth in the factors of support, less concealment, and more respect. Their stories are also revealing a shift from fear to curiosity and a willingness to communicate more openly. The significance of all of this is that the research matters because it expands the scope of SFNT, first of all, into contexts where religions and cultural beliefs can be they're barriers to any kind of movement. It also demonstrates how SFNT can empower families in a way that reconstructs those narratives and bridges between the two. And at a broader level, it shows how language and story can shape not only family relationships, but also religious ideologies and community norms. In other words, SFNT doesn't just help individual families, it points towards systemic change. This research offers a new way forward, one where parents don't have to choose between their faith and their child. And that's not just good, important research, it's hope. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. It was so wonderful. Nice. Yeah.
Oh, I love it.
My name is Coletta Boone. I'm finishing my coursework for PhD at North Central University, which is online. So I'm very happy to be part of this group because I'm not alone. So the topic I hope to do my dissertation on is while training clinician docs to act as co-therapists for children receiving counseling for childhood sexual abuse, improve outcomes. This is a really bad statistic that continues to go in the wrong direction. In the United States is all I really studied. There's a high rate of non-completion of therapy and or low reduction of symptomology. The non-completion of therapy is mainly from the point that the therapy is tough. It's for PTSD there could be other outside traumas of physical abuse. There could be traumatic brain injury included in there. There could be other diagnoses. But the evidence has shown that animal-assisted therapy can lead to improved outcomes. And where I get very concerned is I don't want to be considered a feel-good program. I don't want it to be considered on shaky research. So I've decided now, number one, there is a shortage of dogs available. The research shows the best animal for this type of work is actually a horse, equine
Yes.
therapy. There is a connection between the horse, the therapist, and the patient. And the horse tells the therapist what's going on with the patient. It's very interesting. But for my purposes, I can't use horses yet. But what I'm hoping to do is request a pilot program where I used to work. Sharp Mesa Vista Hospital in San Diego has a childhood sexual abuse program. And so I'm hoping that a pilot program will train a clinician's canine, someone that's already bonded to the clinician. And believe me, I have volunteers. They want to do this. And then improve the therapy completion rates, because what the dog acts is the safety point. So you have a child that's been sexually abused. They come into therapy with a stranger. They're already traumatized, and you see a fuzzy little cute buddy in there. And you can talk to the buddy, and the clinician can gain some access. And then it becomes where the child wants to come in for therapy because they get to see the dog. Dog requires good training. The welfare of the dog is of primary importance when you're designing therapy. It has not been well researched. People want to throw dogs in there, and often where I work, they have facility dogs, and I get very upset when I hear the facility dog got kicked. Trust me, I get very upset. So there has to be guidelines, guidelines, things like that. They're built into what I've already designed. And there are some validated tools. I may keep those validated tools for the clinician before, the parent before, the clinician after the 6 weeks of therapy, because that's about all you get anymore, to see if there's any reduction of symptoms. And most importantly, did the child complete the therapy? Because it is difficult. Boy.
Amazing. So, before we go on, Caitlin, I just want to jump back to you. Are you in the room with us on Zoom? Okay, well, we are going to go on to our last presenter.
Sorry, starting is always difficult. My research focuses on perceptions of connections with farm animals, specifically with farmers with chronic illness in Western Norway. And this is more, it's more focused on daily lives and interactions rather than like formal clinical processes. So just some of the background, although the healing aspects of human-animal relationships have long been recognized, especially through oral storytelling, earlier anthropological research specifically has had a lot of focus on the human side of things and not so much kind of the bidirectional kind of paying attention to the animal's active role in the interactions. So basically, sorry. So research has kind of identified a lot of benefits, specifically with like social interaction, and that nature of things. So I'm trying to really expand on that, and my study adopts the perspective that community integrations and social inclusion has a positive impact on health as a whole. So sort of for the method, I believe that analyzing people's stories, their illness narrative, so the stories they tell about their illness and how they understand it, can help us understand all these processes. So this idea it came partly from personal experience, from kind of growing up in a farming area, and also like being involved in both formal animal assisted therapy for mental health, but also a lot of these kind of informal interactions, as well as just hearing like the stories from farmers that I know, and kind of highlighting the cultural importance of farming in the area that I'm from. So specifically, I'm going to be conducting interviews to kind of get at those stories specifically and really highlight those individual narratives. And I'm also doing a more general survey to really get more of the general perceptions that's a bit more broad. And I'm also doing participant observations, so going to farms and kind of seeing their daily lives and kind of participating in all of their responsibilities. So for my research questions, I really want to know how do farmers in rural Western Norway with chronic health challenges perceive their relationships with farm animals, and just what do those perceptions reveal, like culturally, about how we view care and in the context of human-animal relationships. So I'm going to be analyzing this through like a thematic coding kind of approach. So using qualitative analysis software like Atlas TI, and just looking at broad themes and how stories. So, yeah.
And she's doing it in 2 languages.
Yes. Amazing, everyone. This has been so fascinating. We do have about 15 minutes or so for questions. If you have questions from the room, from the chat, for the presenters.
Can I just make a comment that everyone who talked, I would love to hear a Accepted Academy longer version of all of your things.
Yes, I want to hear more. Accepted Academy longer version. Love.
So interesting.
Shia said yes.
Yes.
Will you just check Caitlin one last time?
Excuse me?
Will you check for Caitlin one last time?
Yes, I will check Caitlin one last time. Maybe Ayana.
Ayana's not
able to
participating. That was
make
my
it.
normal.
Okay. I know there were a few questions, Nadia, that were directed to you. I don't know if you've had a chance to have a look at them, and if you would want to come off mute and answer some of those. Just bring you here.
Awesome. Yeah, hi. I see there was a question about, did I write my potential ideas for future research in my statement of purpose, or just concentrate on reasons why to be a good fit? I want to clarify that I'm not in a PhD program. And so for the master's, it was a little bit easier because I didn't have to be so specific. I actually didn't include my research idea at all in my application because I just wasn't there yet. I knew I wanted to study history. I knew from my background I wanted to focus on history of medicine, and that was about as far as I got. Honestly, I think I made something up about like what would be interesting to research. And I got rejected actually from a university. So don't follow my lead. But in typical stubborn fashion, I rejected their rejection and I asked them to reconsider. And so they did. Long story short, I got in. So I didn't actually I didn't actually end up dealing with any of what I presented today until like the last 6 months of my program. So that's the answer. If you have specific questions, I'm happy to answer those.
I think there was a question about the entry point to her research.
Yes.
How did you come to your topic?
Sorry, guys. Great question. I don't know. I think I just read a lot, honestly. Like that was the suggestion people offered me, was just read a lot. And so I read a lot of manuscripts. I read a lot of printed text in the area of my interest. And I notoriously have really struggled coming up with research topics. It's the hardest thing for me. I like everything and I want to study everything. So what I ended up doing, which is my go-to now, which might sound absurd, but hear me out. I hike once a week. Without exercise and movement, I am an untrained border collie and nobody wants to be around me. So I hike, I hike regularly, and what I do is I put my headphones in and I talk to myself. And I have conversations with myself about what would be interesting to research. I had like a small interest in understanding like the intellectual essentially like ideologies of early modern medicine. And basically what my supervisor suggested was that instead of coming up with a research topic for the dissertation and using the primary sources to answer it, read the primary sources and let the question essentially jump out to me, which sounded like super woo-woo and I hated it and it was not certain enough. But I found it really worked because I couldn't come up with a researchable enough question until I'd actually read the material to determine like what was there and what wasn't there. So that was what really helped, was reading, seeing what struck my interest, seeing what was missing, seeing what was there, and forming ideas from that point.
Okay, we've got a question for you. Is it medical schools in the US or specific states?
Great question. Thank you, Claudia. For me, I'm going to do a case study on my institution because I work in a medical school that sucks at doing what I described. So we're going to, we have a new director of clinical skills who's going to be doing a lot of change. And I'm going to study how she does this because it's something I've been advocating for years for, and now we have the right leadership on board with making those changes at the right level. And I feel like that I'm just in this perfect place, perfect time to document something that is a systemic issue in other medical schools that have a competency-based medical education program, which is a fairly popular model in Europe, and it's gaining popularity in North America. So coming to a medical school near you.
I love that so much. All right, we are nearing time. Does anyone have any last questions? Shai, I saw your question. Nadia, if you wouldn't mind popping some resources in our resources tab, that would be great. Thank you. Appreciate it. Any final questions for our presenters?
How's your mental health? Public speaking?
That's actually a great question. I suppose to the presenters, Maria, Nadia, and those in the room, how did that feel? Maria, I'm gonna just spotlight you too. You could come with me if you would like to.
Hi. I didn't understand if there is a question.
Sorry, Maria, I was just asking how you felt with doing the 3-minute thesis presentation.
It's a very challenge for me because it's the first time that I speak English not at my university. So I'm very happy to do that, and it's a very honor for me to stay here with the Accessibility Society friends.
Amazing. Any other questions? Oh, sorry.
Could we also possibly get a list of what everyone's title of it was? Just I think didn't quite get all of them written down.
We will post the slides on Circle after post event, yes.
We will post the slides on Circle. Why is this not doing what it needs to? All right, everyone, we are going to take a little bit of a break. We're going to take 15 minutes before we pick up on our next session. Do go grab some water, grab some coffee, whatever you feel that you need, and we will come back and pick up our funding. Does
anyone want to go get coffee?
Well done, everyone.
Sorry,
Interesting. Good. Yeah, I hope that's like.
No, nothing to that.
Working on that for many years.
I made sure of that.
Forgive me, darling.
Okay. You'd think after doing admissions for like 5 years that this would be less nerve-wracking. However, the admissions process itself is a bit nerve-wracking, so I feel like it's an inclusive experience. So today, instead of just talking about graduate admissions, I'm also going to talk a bit about funding. It's something that I see a lot of inquiry about online. I get a lot of comments about this. I do have videos on funding on my YouTube channel. However, I wanted this to be another space where we can have a bit of a conversation about accessing funding, how to apply for it, because a lot of the principles that apply in graduate admissions also apply when you're applying for fellowships, when you're applying for grants and seeking out opportunities to get funding to go to things like conferences. So talk a little bit about the admissions landscape at the moment. I would be remiss if I weren't to say that at the moment, there is a lot of uncertainty in graduate admissions. In the United States, a lot of decisions are going to be made over the next 3 months over, what if those PhD programs are going to continue to access funding, if graduate study in certain programs are even going to be offered at all, with department funding getting cut and federal funding being basically pulled back from all academic institutions, and scholarly research is just going to look very different than in any previous year that we have, sought to support students through this process. And what I want to say throughout all of this is one that I am a big believer in experimenting. I'm a big believer in still shooting your shot, regardless of if we are uncertain of what this landscape looks like, and no amount of effort that's put into an application goes wasted. Whether you are drafting an application that doesn't end up going through, that application proposal or anything that you write is going to be useful as you continue to iterate on applications in the future. So even if you are working through a process with your applications and those programs are getting cut or there's things that are going to be changed, just know that that effort is not being lost and the time to start on your applications is now. So don't wait for decisions to be made by these institutions. The goal right now is to develop your research proposals, understand your ideas, because it's never going to get lost. Like that work, that effort, the amount of time that you dedicate to those application materials, that can come out in a conference paper. It can come out in independent research if you need to take another year. It can come out in funding proposals that you're going to return to as a draft. One of the things that I appreciate the most about having gone through the admissions process, so many years ago as, applying for master's degrees is that application ended up being the foundation for my PhD applications. And then it ended up being the foundation for my funding proposals and all of those things. So no matter what, even if we're a little uncertain of what that landscape looks like, I still want you to take a chance, write out those application materials, and continue to iterate on that. In connection with the application and graduate admissions landscape, we also have a funding landscape that looks a little bit different right now. Not only do we have funding that is just a little bit uncertain, or funding is going to be coming from different places, I think we're going to have about a 3-year period where we are going to see funding change dramatically from federal funding and state funding and kind of public funding to nonprofits stepping up and private organizations creating funding opportunities for research. It's going to look a little bit different, and we have to be cognizant of what organizations we are affiliating ourselves with when we are actually going and developing our research with their funding. But it's just something that we need to be a little bit crafty about. And what I mean by crafty is like, we just need to be a bit creative about our willingness to actually step outside of the university's websites and their funding opportunities that they made us aware of, to think about what other opportunities there are. And that's what brings me back to the idea that having community, having this network, having access to people that know things that you don't, or like, you know, a website they can point you to. It is challenging to find people that have that information, but not only sharing it within Accepted, but sharing it with others at your institutions, sharing it with other people that ask for that support, and having kind of an open mentality about having that information and sharing it is something that I think is going to make a big difference. I mentioned at the beginning that there are common threads between graduate admissions and funding. And ultimately, and I'll come back to this idea, applications are an act of marketing. It is your ability to market yourself, find that market fit, and be able to discuss and use language that helps somebody understand the value of your work in terms that they can comprehend. So that begins with things like research proposals. So research proposals at the very, like, we'll go over the kind of in-depth detail on what those actually look like, but research proposals essentially outline what you want to do with your research, where you're going, and how you're going to do it. A personal statement, on the other hand, is often focused on how your personal experiences have lent itself to your research and why it is that you are the right person to do it. However, I'm going to actually propose a very different approach than I have in the past, and also what we often see when we look at personal statements. So you have to wait for that punchline. CVs and resumes. Now, I've seen a lot in it Accepted, the common room thread in particular, where people are asking for examples of CVs and being a little bit concerned about what that looks like in the UK landscape, in the EU landscape, applying to places like in Australia. And one of the things that I have found is having a template is just such an important starting place. So whether that's a CV or a resume, having kind of a standard template that you are using and building upon, that template can come from people that you know that have applied for similar things, that are in a similar field to you. And there's also templates that you can get online. We used to sell them on the Accepted Consulting website. But ultimately, it's about having that kind of standard rubric. And then you're going to want to create a document of your CV and your resume and just keep it on your computer and update it once a quarter. So you're just going to check in on it, and being able to, like, it's really hard when you're writing your applications to just remember everything that you possibly did. So having something that you continuously return to as your overall template, and then editing based on the actual application itself. Letters of recommendation. We'll get into the importance of this and also how it is that we go about this process. But letters of recommendation are still very much part of the process, for better or for worse. And in addition to that, we also have written samples. Now, written samples look a little bit different depending on your field of study. Some fields aren't going to ask for this at all, especially if you're in the sciences. But if you are in the social sciences or in the humanities, or applying to certain law degrees, for example, then you might need a written sample. And if me saying this is making you terribly anxious, just know that you can take the time to work through this written sample. We have people at Accepted that can help support you, whether that's, going through the researchers program or the fellows program with me and Kate, or actually just asking people in the community to help review and revise alongside you. So let's talk a little bit about research proposals. Now, every program, every discipline has a slightly different format, but the general kind of standard for a proposal is that we start with basically an impact statement or an abstract. Now, when I say abstract, we often think of like no more than 500 words. And this is going to look different depending on where you're applying and the number of words you're actually allowed within that proposal. So what you want to do within that first couple of sentences is make me readily aware of what impact you are trying to have with this research. It's not what you are doing, it's where you want to go with it, and how it is that you want that research to actually apply in your field. What questions are unanswered, and how are you going to actually seek to answer them? So often academics, and we're going to talk a little bit about this in the back to school week for the public speaking session on the Tuesday, we often have this habit as academics of like immediately going to oh, I'm an early modern historian who studies law. And you just kind of go into like the general subject matter, or if you like go one step further and you talk about your research, it's just like the general statement of what the research is. In this impact statement, in your abstract, I want you to start from the place of impact. I want you to start from the place of absence. And then talk about the overall structure. It just allows whoever is reading, who is very likely not a specialist in your field, to immediately connect with what it is that you're trying to achieve. Then you have the literature review. Now, I'm not going to go into literature reviews. We could do an entire session on them. I actually have a full YouTube video, and for many of these things, I actually have YouTube videos available. So if Claudia or Amber could also add the link to that playlist, I would greatly appreciate it. Because a lot of this information is like embedded from like 2 or 3 years ago, but it's still it is still relevant. In terms of your method, methods look different depending on your field of study. If I were to ask a historian, what is your method? Very few of them could tell me. They're like, oh, I just analyze primary sources. What are you talking about? This is also the framework that you use in order to study and analyze that piece of work. So whether that's, you know, as a scholar of race, gender, reproduction, like that's the framework in which I approach analyzing my primary sources. This can also look like theory. So the type of theory that you're applying, whether it's intersectionality, or you are applying, like in the case of Kate's paper, just because I read it the other day, like thinking about like the concept of the gaze. And that's actually applying what you're learning in literature review, but actually saying how that's going to be applied in your own approach. So this is often the wedding of multiple theories or the creation of a new theory that you're proposing, or methodologically, this can also apply to how it is that you're analyzing and collecting data. So data can be, you know, qualitative data as well as quantitative data, and it can look like a variety of things. So your methodology is the approach in which you're going to actually analyze what it is that you're doing. And then lastly, we've got your research plan. Now the research plan can be this really long, like written out piece. This is something that's quite standard at Oxford. When I'm working with applicants on the Oxbridge applications for PhDs, this tends to be quite long, the research plan, but for some programs, especially if it's a limited word limit, that's going to specifically focus on like, when are you going to do certain things? How are you going to do it? What is your overall kind of scaffolding for how it is that you're going to get this project done? And can you articulate to me that it's feasible based on the type of materials you're wanting to look at, the way you're planning on analyzing it? And for example, if you're going to need travel in there, what is that going to look like? The important thing about the end of the research plan is how it is that you connect it to how that funding body or how that university plays a role in that funding or in that plan. So what is it about a specific grant that's available at this specific college, or is it that this specific fellowship makes it possible for you to get to an archive or to actually visit your subjects in a foreign country? So you're going to want to be able to articulate not only how you plan to go about that research, but also the role that that institution or that organization is going to play in that research. And the thing that I think people often miss is like this the part where we're marketing ourselves. Like the research itself is important, and finding that kind of that fit where that specific organization, that department, that funding body, you know, sees the value in the work and they see how they can fit into it. But this research plan part is where you actually articulate that relationship. Okay, this is where we take things a little bit sideways. So I have helped over 600 people apply to grad school with the assistance of a team. Right. But I myself have overseen over 300 applications. I have read hundreds of statements, thousands of drafts, and I've read many that were successful, some that were not. And the thing that I found in personal statements, and a lot of the advice that is online, it is advice that I have given myself, is that they often focus so much on the personal. And like that personal like anecdote, that moment of discovery. Now, the challenge that I've seen in reading so many applications is that moment of discovery, unfortunately, is often reflected in the experiences of many of the applicants. For example, if you're wanting to go into developmental psychology, it's likely an experience that you had with a child or you yourself as a child. And as somebody like that experience is really like special to you, but your ability to articulate that unique experience to a body in like 2 sentences is really difficult. And so I'm going to actually propose a different approach that not only do I believe, but I have seen to be more effective in helping you land applications. And that is to talk about how an experience that you have had with a method, with a practice, with a skill applies to the research. So I'll give you an example. So back in the day, way back in the day, when I was in community college, I was working in medical device regulatory affairs in the Silicon Valley with a bunch of tech bros, okay? And I had to write these applications to FDA. And with these reports, these startups would come to us and they would basically say, like, what are the precedential devices? How do we position our product? How do we look at the clinical data? To me, it's very boring. I'm sure it's exciting to somebody else. Could not be more excited. And I had to write this report on a fertility device. And I'm going through all of these studies. I have to like analyze all of this clinical data. And I noticed that not a single Black woman is in this study. Now, as a historian, I know the history that Black women have with medical practice and in medical experimentation, and it is not a good history. It is one of deep violation. And so there's this mistrust. And so I started like looking into literature on how on the history of why it is that clinicians have such a difficulty enrolling Black subjects in clinical studies, but specifically Black women. And so I went to the company and I proposed, hey, like there is an absence in the clinical data. Like here are a couple of studies on how it is to go through about enrollment. I really recommend that you be the first device on the market that caters to Black women's fertility. Now, they didn't listen to me. But in that, because I was coding all of this clinical data into my own database and having to like work so intimately with the subjects and intimately with the individual data points, these subjects that obviously I don't know their name for confidentiality reasons. But because of that, I was able to pull out a story, was able to recognize a pattern that I knew about historically. And that was why I started using qualitative coding when I was reading legal records, because it helps me see things in the historical record that I wouldn't if I wasn't working so intimately with it through this practice of data entry. So it's a story that doesn't make a lot of sense when you first tell it. When you begin and you start talking about, I like worked with data and I was like in this kind of data entry role where I had to report. But in the end, it shows how that experience, developing those skills, applying it in a way that was critical and applying that back to my historical research, that I was going to come at it with a unique approach. Now, I want you to think about a skill that you possess, a skill that you've practiced and honed in a different area of your life. Now, this does not have to be professional. This can be creative. We talked about this in the writing retreat last week with Talissa, and specifically talking about how her approach to research is so informed by her work as a documentarian, as a filmmaker. The ability to tell stories, to pull those out, to be able to get into the little vignettes is what makes her research really special. And so it doesn't have to be a specific skill that, is like professionally exciting. It can be your approach, your method, your skill in honing a craft. And I want you to think about what those are, and then thinking about how that then applies to the way that you approach research, the way that you ask questions, and the way that you solve them. I mean, that's essentially what I needed to cover. And in terms of the kind of why statement, and this is the part that really sells an application, in my opinion. I think you're at, like, the actual research itself, at the end of the day, like that, it's about fit, it's about timing, it's about who's sitting in the room at the time. You don't have control over that. But the way that you can articulate the value of your research, the impact, your approach, and how it is that you're going to perform it, but also what role that department, that committee, that institution is going to play in that journey, in your ability to discover and actually articulate those things, that's how you develop the why statement. Now, oftentimes it's like, oh, who am I going to work with? And I think that their work is so amazing. Tell me what you don't know and how they're going to teach you. How are you going to work together? But beyond that, like, go beyond the people. It's not just your supervisors. It's not just the committees. It's not just the classes that you're going to take. It's the places where you are going to, add value within that institution. You're going to get involved in working groups. You're going to get involved in research symposia. You're going to be able to engage in the funding opportunities that are available at that institution. So I want you to think beyond just the people, to think about why that institution is the right fit for you at that time. Statements of purpose. Now, this was like my bread and my butter back when I did admissions, and that was when I was running accepted consulting. Because a statement of purpose is the blending, it's the marriage of the research proposal and the personal statement. It's most often used in graduate admissions, especially in the UK and less so in the EU. But this is the overall structure. And if you want a little bit more depth on how to actually, like, some examples and some templates, we do have the graduate admissions essay guide, which goes into this in depth. But first and foremost, we have that first section, which is like that abstract piece of the impact statement. Now, general statements of purpose are about 1,000 words. So this paragraph, section 1, should take up about 250 words. So about 25% of your statement overall. This is where you articulate the research that you want to do and the gap that's in the field and how it is that you plan to fill it. Now, section 2 can be 1 to 2 body paragraphs, and this makes up about 50% of the overall statement, so about 500 words in total. And what I want you to do is actually identify 2 professional or research-based experiences and the skills that you developed in doing that work on that project that you were on. And I want you to focus primarily on how that then ties back to how it is that you're going to approach your research going forward. Now, the little bonus point is if at the end of section 2, you can also clearly articulate where there is room for growth. So being able to actually state, like, this is where I lack training. This is where I've not had an opportunity. And this program, this research will allow me to develop that further. Being able to have that kind of, like, I guess, like, humility check. So many times we see statements, and I've read countless of them, where it kind of falls on a spectrum of either somebody who lacks so much confidence that they refuse to say, like, what kind of impact they're going to have, and they write in such a way that it's like such an honor that program would be giving you a spot. Like,
yes,
your research helps them. Okay, your research shows them off. You having them on your CV in future gives them credibility.
Mhm.
So they're not doing you a favor, okay? You're doing them a favor by being there and by doing this work. But then on the other hand, I've also seen applications that refuse to show any amount of challenge, any amount of anywhere where they lack confidence in their research or where they lack training. I was a transfer student. I didn't get to do Caribbean studies. I didn't get to do a lot of, like, English history stuff. There was a lot of historiography and a lot of literature that I had to catch up on. But so many of us have had that experience. We had to focus, or other things happened this is where you show that, you know, life experience has hindered your ability to access certain resources, have time to work on a project to its full extent, to be able to explore languages in the way that you would wish you could. So you're going to identify that for them, and you're also going to show them how that program is going to set you up to fill those gaps, fill those holes in your training so that you can fully actualize your project. And that's when we get to the why statement. Now, I'm not going to repeat this because it's kind of what I just said with the personal statements, but I ultimately, like, why is this program well suited to help you see this project through to the end? Now, CVs and resumes, especially for those that are non-traditional students and are coming back to academia, it can be quite challenging because oftentimes, especially when we're applying for like professional full-time roles, we focus on the soft skills. It's like your ability to communicate with others, your ability, like your time management skills, et cetera. In this case, I want you to actually lean on the hard skills. Like your coding, like if you have coding ability, is it your analytical abilities? Is it, you know, being able to work with Excel sheets and databases? Whatever that may be, focus on the hard skills. It's going to outline the range of experiences that you have. And the difference between the CV and the resume is like the CV can kind of capture all of it. There are some programs that are going to specifically say like only 4 pages or whatever it may be, and then you're going to need to differentiate what's the most important. When it comes to your resume, on the other hand, because like oftentimes a resume is only about a page, you're going to have to be quite choosy about what it is that you're going to identify as kind of important touchstones in your career. And you want to focus primarily on the pieces that, you know, make you stand out. So what are the experiences that look a little bit different from your colleagues? For me, the thing that was pointed out on my resume was that I left in there that I rode horses professionally. It was nowhere else in my application. It didn't make sense to mention it in a personal statement. It didn't make sense to mention it anywhere else. It was in the CV. And that was the thing that got mentioned in my interview, was wanting to know more about, like, you know, how did you go into academia after like riding horses? So anything that gets you to stand out a little bit as having a unique experience, if there's not another place for you to articulate that, whether that be a diversity statement or there's no personal statement, for example, let the CV or the resume do that work. Written samples. So there's kind of a spectrum in terms of like people that I've worked with. On the one hand, it's the concern that they don't have enough of a written sample, whether that's like they don't have a long enough piece of work or they haven't been back to school in a while. And in which case, having a little bit of support on how to actually direct that written sample is something that's quite important. So that's either seeking out a mentor of somebody who is in your field. In an ideal world, it's somebody that's teaching your class, or that's working with you on a research project, or that's working with you on a conference paper and asking them to read and offer feedback on your written work as you develop it. Another opportunity is like actually leaning on the people in Accepted and seeing if there's somebody else that can offer that support, whether that be somebody on the team or somebody in the community. But on the other hand, if you're somebody that has had a really long thesis, dissertation from a master's degree, a longer piece of work where it feels really difficult to parse out which section to give, I want you to focus on the piece where your voice is most present. So this is not the literature review. It can be like a bit the methodology section, but it's really the findings, the analysis, your ability to actually show that independent thought, your analytical skills in your field. That's the piece that they're going to want to see the most. However, sometimes that's like the middle of your dissertation. It was like I think it was the last 25 pages of my undergraduate thesis that ended up being my written sample. In which case, a lot of context gets missed out. And so you can add a cover sheet that just adds a bit of context to that committee. Like, you know, thank you so much for your consideration. The section of the written sample that I have selected for you is from section 3, or like, this section of my undergraduate thesis on blank, blank, blank. Talk a little bit about the argument. Ideally, this should be less than about 300 words. You do want to keep it short. You do want to keep it quite simple, but it is important to know where they're going to jump into. So that way it's very clear to them where you are in your storytelling, in the overall research development, et cetera. But this independent analysis bit is the part that they're looking for. And letters of recommendation. Okay, again, for better or for worse, I think, on the one hand, if you are a traditional student, letters of recommendation and being able to articulate those relationships is great. But we are a community of experiences that range from the kind of standard traditional experience of networking in academia, all the way through not really having relationships with professors. I worked with a client who hadn't been back to school in 30 years. She didn't have a letter of recommendation. She didn't have academic references. And so that's when you have to get a little bit creative with your path. And if you ever want to discuss that with anybody, please feel free to reach out to me or to Kate, because there are steps that we're going to recommend in order to develop those relationships on the way to you applying. But ultimately, this is somebody that should know your work intimately, who has been the person providing feedback, who knows the evolution of your research. But that doesn't mean that you can't also have a bit of variety on that application. And this is where I actually argue you need to think strategically about your letters, because all of the different people that you're going to want to ask need to help identify the full picture of who you are. And this is what's really important about this particular note. If you have ever had an experience in academia or with your research that has caused a leave of absence or a time in which you really struggled, sometimes it's not the right place to do that in the personal statement or in the other aspects of the application. The reason is it feels defensive to an admissions committee. It feels like you're needing to over-explain why you struggled. And this is where having letters of recommendation from people that really know you and have ideally seen you through that process is really helpful, because they can add texture, they can add context for you. And the thing is, you can also ask for that. So when I went to my recommenders, when I was applying for PhD programs, I specifically had a professor, and I think he was the only professor I had talked to about this, who knew that I was running a business on the side of doing my thesis. And I had a horse training business up in Northern California. I used to fly every other week to go to horse shows and to train while I was at UCLA. And ultimately, what I asked of him was, that's an important part of my education. That's an important part of my story. And there's nowhere else in the application I can really articulate this. Can you please talk about how, as a non-traditional transfer student, my experience is unique? Because there's just not a place for me to do it myself. And then I went to other professors to talk about my research skills. And I went to other professors to talk about, how I engage in the classroom or whatever it may be. But be strategic about who you're asking and what you're asking them for, because they can add a little bit more context to your application. And in articulating that and being direct with them, you are also ensuring that the admissions committee is getting a much fuller picture, because I've written letters of recommendation. I have read tons of letters of recommendation, and ultimately they all start to kind of sound the same. She's a great student. She's wonderful to have in the classroom. She's dedicated. She's a great researcher. Wonderful. That doesn't say much. The grades kind of reflect that. So what can you ask of them? A story, an anecdote, like a project that you worked on that can add another layer to your application. And this is where I think I personally think letters of recommendation are one of the major reasons I got into Yale, because I asked of them specifically to give me to help me give them the full picture. And lastly, asking early, and also saying, what can I do to earn a letter of recommendation? Is there anything you need from me? I've had students, I've had undergrads that have asked for letters of recommendation for grad school and whatnot. And they send like your resume and your personal statement and all this stuff like right off the bat. And I'm like, I just needed to have a conversation first. And I wanted to know like where you're going and like why you want to go to grad school and have a bit of a conversation about it. And so going to office hours with your professors, going to meetings with scholars that have been mentors to you, going to your supervisor at work and having an honest conversation and, saying, I really have loved working with you. I really admire you. And I got this out of your class, or I got this out of this specific experience. And I was wondering, I'm applying to grad school and I was wondering if you'd be willing to write me a letter of recommendation. Now, everybody that was on my committee wanted something different. Some of them wanted to see my application materials, others did not, they didn't care. And so giving yourself enough time, just in case they do want to read something or they do want to have a conversation with you about it, is really important. Do not, I'm saying this, I don't think anybody that's actually watching this would do this, but please, for the love of God, do not list a professor on an application without asking them first. I once bear witness to like a conversation with my undergrad advisor and a student in my class, where he's like, did you list me for your U Chicago application? You didn't talk to me. I don't think any of you are going to make that mistake, but I'm just going to throw it out there. Do not do that. Okay. One of the last things that I want to cover kind of like in the details of programs is it's like, especially at grad school, it's not about the university. Like, the university matters insofar as they have resources, they have support and opportunities, they have accommodations, especially if you're somebody who has, a disability or other issues that I please go actually look at reviews of their disabilities office and their accessibility opportunities at that institution. Going and looking beyond the brand, beyond the name of the university is so essential. But it's also not just your advisor. Like, I cannot stress this enough, like the people that you are going to interact with, the registrars, the librarians, the archivists, the accessibility officers, those are the people that really hold up the scaffolding of your experience when you are going to graduate school. And so it needs to go beyond the advisor. They are not the end all be all. The other thing is to look holistically at like, does that department actually have a committee for me? Am I going to receive the support that I need? And that support looks different for everyone. Now, I didn't know this when I applied to graduate school, and this is advice that I give absolutely everyone. I think it's really essential to talk to people that you're going to work with, or at the very least, talk to their graduate students. And I say this from like a bit of a difficult place. I also care about your safety in a department, and getting to know like the whisper networks and the things that students know is really important to where it is that you are going to spend your time doing research and where you are going to dedicate your career. In addition to that, by the way, this is not me saying anything about Yale, it's just experiences with other applicants. In addition to that, having a support system within that department of other professors that you're going to work with, people that like might not even be on your committee, those things are important. And in order to find that information, this is where time is a big consideration. Taking the time to talk to graduate students, taking time to talk to the director of graduate studies, and making sure that that's a program and a structure that works best for you. Now, some questions that I think that you should think to ask when you're trying to identify fit is talking to somebody about, it's not just their like supervising style. I see that question come up a lot. Supervisors sometimes like don't actually know their supervising style. They can't articulate it. And so going to other students is really important. In addition to that, talking about pacing, talking about, when do most of this person's students do their qualifying exams? What kind of support do they offer in preparing the prospectus? Like, these are all questions I wish I had asked. These are all questions I wish I had known to ask at the beginning of when I was applying to graduate school. So seeing what kind of support is actually offered, and also, it's not just what is offered, what is not offered. Like, what do you think is lacking in this program? Where do you think students are lacking support? And it just gives you a fuller picture of what you're getting yourself into. Because as a non-traditional student who was paying these application fees on my own, I could only apply to a few schools. And so I think we should demand of these institutions that they give us the time to ask these questions and to understand what we're getting ourselves into. That's just my 2 cents. So I say that applications are an act of marketing and time and fit. And the reason I say that is so often I see and I feel the fear of rejection. And I see people just absolutely devastated when something doesn't work out with an application. And I want you to know that it's not necessarily about your research. It is about identifying which program is going to actually host your research in a good way, in a way that's helpful, but it's also timing. So things that, especially in history, the political climate immediately impacts what we prioritize in admissions. For example, fantastically so, we saw an uptick in support of Ukrainian historians, of Eastern European studies a couple of years ago for a particular reason. And there was more funding placed in those places, but that also means that there's this weird timeliness, in which case sometimes it's not the right time. Sometimes it's not the right fit. I had a client who is cookie cutter, the perfect applicant. Perfect applicant. She went to Harvard undergrad, she had won awards, she had been published, she had gone to Cambridge to do a master's degree. She got rejected from Yale twice in a row. It just wasn't the right fit for that supervisor. It wasn't the right fit for the program. And then she landed one of the biggest scholarships in higher education and ended up at Stanford, and she's great. So there are times, even if you hit all of the marks, and we're always so worried about hitting all the marks, sometimes it's beyond our control. And so that's why I think it's so important to strategically think about where you're applying, the fit of your research within that department. The fit of your research for a funding application is also critical. The thing is, also these things are competitive. There are hundreds of people that are applying for these things. But ultimately, and this is what I also think is important, your application doesn't have to be perfect for you to be a good fit. I did not have a perfect application in any way, shape, or form. I had withdrawn from over 10 classes in my undergraduate career. The beginning of my undergraduate career was 2.0 and below. I got put on academic probation at the beginning of my time in community college. I did not think it was possible to go to college after that. I didn't think it was ever possible to go to a place like freaking Oxford after that, let alone Yale. You kidding? Never would have thought that was possible. But when you have research that resonates, that is timely, that fits what that advisor is looking for at that time, then there are opportunities, and it's not about those little hiccups throughout. They're part of your story. It's part of why it is that you do good research. It's part of why it is that you're going to have such an important impact in your field, because you've had those experiences and because you care. So on the one hand, it might not be about you if you got rejected. It might not be specifically it might just not be the right time. It might just not be the right fit. But on the other hand, if it is, and that's also something you don't have control over, then a lot of these things that you worry about often don't matter. I'm gonna try to speed it up a little bit because I know I've been talking for a while. I have a video on my YouTube channel about finding funding, and I promise I will do another full workshop on this because it is a whole other kettle of fish. But oftentimes we look at funding pages on universities and that's like as far as we go. But for independent researchers, for early career scholars, for postdocs, for people that are pre-ABD and after ABD, for master's students, for undergrads, for community college students, professional organizations that offer conferences, for example, Organization of American Historians, AHA, like all of the different letters of organizations. They often have funding that is accessible and, you know, is like tied to a specific type of project or like, you know, it needs to intersect with something. But we often just like don't even look at these organizations and it takes time. And that's the thing that's like really freaking annoying. I would really, if anybody wants to work with me on a database to collect all this information, Hannah, let's get together.
Yes.
Libraries, public libraries, especially like big cities, also oftentimes have access to funding. And if you can just so happen to like have an application where you can say how it is that some of their resources might be helpful to your project, that makes that accessible. Research centers and institutes. This also includes like think tanks and other private organizations and nonprofit organizations that, you know, do specific types of research. This is the part in why we need the database, is that it's just hard to find these things and it takes time and it takes a lot of frustrating searches. But that's why I think it's also important that you are in a space where that information is being shared. So it's at your institution, it's talking to other graduate students, it's talking to, you know, it's talking to administrators and asking what funding's been pulled in the past. Some of us don't have the time to do that. Some of us don't have the energy. And that it's frustrating to me because that shouldn't be the limitation. But that's why I think it's important to have spaces like Accepted. Shout out. On Accepted, we have a page that says opportunities, funding, and jobs. Now, this is where not only can you seek out resources, like people will post jobs that they see for, you know, fields that might not be necessarily be their own, or they might completely, you know, they just share resources on jobs and other opportunities, conferences, calls for paper, and funding. And what I want us all to, I want to encourage us all to do is to be aware of those opportunities and to share it with others. You know, this is the part of the no gatekeeping philosophy. Like if we have information that we can share and would be of value to somebody else, let's share it, let's make that accessible, and let's build a database so it's easy to search. And lastly, I want to change your perspective a little bit on rejection. So I have a friend, her name is Grace McGowan, Dr. Grace McGowan. And she had this project when she was in her PhD and she was applying to academic jobs. She called it the 100 Failures Project. And basically she created a database where she wrote every single opportunity that she applied for. It was about tracking the effort. It was about tracking the try. And it was, you know, tracking the things that were successful, the things that were unsuccessful, the things that didn't get a response. But it was her way of saying, you know, when I get to add another line to this database, it means that I tried. It means that I put myself out there and I gave myself a potential opportunity. And I want us to all kind of adopt that mentality. Because we put so much pressure on each individual opportunity, application, etc. And the thing about admissions, the thing about funding, especially right now, is that it can be a long road. It could be a lot of rejection. It can be very challenging to persevere, but this is my motto. If the goal genuinely matters to you, if your education genuinely really matters to you to your core, It might take time. It might take effort. It might take some rejection. But ultimately, if the goal matters, the amount of time it takes to get there shouldn't. And we're all on our own journey. And that time is gonna look different. The timeline is going to shift. Your priorities are gonna change. Your research might change. But I'm a believer that, you know, those blocks ultimately lead you to where it is that you are meant to go. I wouldn't have fallen in love with education. I wouldn't have become a historian if I hadn't failed those classes in community college. If I hadn't dropped out of community college for a year. And so all of those opportunities, like I just think of all of the things that I've applied for or tried that didn't quite work out. At the end of the day, you know, 5, 10 years down the line, 30 years down the line, so that individual application, that one rejection, it doesn't matter. Because ultimately, you know, if you got to the goal, if you got to actually engage in your education and, you know, have the opportunity to pursue it, who cares how long it took? That's just my 2 cents. So. I don't know where my partner went. But in conclusion, this has been a really special weekend. And the fact that all of you are here, those of you that are on Zoom, live stream, and sitting with me here in this room, we have been through an emotional roller coaster as a collective. But I just want to say thank you, not only for being here, but for holding space for others. But more importantly, for holding space for yourself. By prioritizing your education, by prioritizing being here in this room, being open to having these conversations, and also being willing for others to support you through this weekend. There she is. You have embodied what it is that we are trying to do with Accepted, is creating a safe space for everybody that loves learning, everybody who loves their education. And I just can't wait to see what we accomplish in the next year. This community is led by you all. You get to be the deciding factor on where we go. And so with that said, thank you for being here. Thank you to Kate. Kate, is there anything that you want to add? No. And hopefully we'll see you back here next year.